Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is the opening to what will probably be the longest vlog I ever shoot for this channel because it's probably going to last for the next 4 years. Although I guess when you're seeing this, it's already happened. On my 36th birthday, I posted my 40 before 40 TBR, so 40 books that I want to read before I'm 40, and I decided that I was going to vlog all of them. Even in that video, I talked about how much of a nightmare it would be if I read one of the books and then forgot to do vlog footage for it, and then later that day, I went to go have my bath reading one of those books, didn't take any footage of it. So if nothing else, it's going to be interesting to see how much B-roll I get for every particular book. There's no particular order to the books on my 40 for 40 TBR, so I decided that I could just pick one of them that I had physically to start reading directly on my birthday, and the one that I chose was The Christie Affair. I haven't finished reading it, I'm only a few chapters into it. However, I am very much enjoying it. I'm 46 pages in, and we are on Friday, December 3rd, 1926, the last day scene. If you don't know anything about this book, this is about the 11 days that Agatha Christie went missing and nobody has any idea what happened. However, this is from the perspective of her husband's mistress, who he is going to leave Agatha for and he is going to marry. A tiny detail that really hit home for me was while I was reading these chapters, I found out that in this book, when this happened, Agatha was 36 years old, which is the age that I just turned, so that made me happy. Like I said, I've just started reading this, so I just wanted to start the clips for this. I'll show you the beautiful bath I was having, because that was lovely. But I just wanted to start this vlog with a stationary camera. I'm actually shooting this clip right after shooting my weekly entertainment wrap-up for the week. Because if you've seen my vlogs before, you probably know from here I'll use a lot of handheld camera angles for updates, but I wanted to start in a stationary place and let you know that I have started this TBR and I am very much enjoying it, and obviously I will let you know how it goes. So I definitely meant to update you before I finished The Christie Affair, but I just kind of plowed through the last little bit because there were definitely sections that made me go, are you fucking kidding me? Which was kind of great. Some things I didn't see coming, and then some things I saw kind of slot into place as they were happening. The weird thing about this book is our main character, or our protagonist, or our narrator, is very unreliable and has all of these different scenes where she's not there, but she's telling you what happened, which is just kind of fascinating to me. And it all comes back to this idea of lucid dreaming versus lucid living, and that's something I didn't really catch on until the very end is what was happening. This whole idea of just like making life whatever you want because you can, because it's your story. So without giving too much away, I did end up enjoying this. There were parts that I was like, why are we learning all of these things? And then I was completely blindsided when I realized why we were learning the things. But yeah, that's 1 out of 40. Done. Hello, it's a beautiful Saturday morning. I've decided that I'm going to finally pick up Dawn of the Dead. Now, this is a book somebody lent to me years ago and I've been meaning to read because it sounds cheesy as all hell. In fact, previously I have done a dramatic reading of the synopsis, so through the powers of editing, I'm just gonna go back to that video and insert that clip here. This is the first in a series and it's called Dawn of the Dead. This is a discarded library copy, and I'm just going to read you the back because it's excellent. Beautiful, smart, and chic, Pepper Martin never had to work a day in her life. Until her surgeon daddy was convicted of fraud, her wealthy fiancé took a powder, and the family fortune ran bone dry. Suddenly desperate, the inexperienced ex-rich girl was forced to take on the only job she could get, as a tour guide in a cemetery. Side note, I used to be a tour guide and I used to go into 2 different cemeteries. But a grave situation took a turn for the worse when a head-on collision with a headstone left her with an unwanted ability to communicate with the disgruntled deceased. And now, Pepper has a whacked mafia don demanding that she hunt down his killers and threaten to haunt her until she does. Honestly, that's why I borrowed it years ago. Why haven't I read this? I don't know. I should probably push it up my TBR. I love making editing Kathy do things. She loves it too, I'm sure. This is a discarded library copy, obviously, and I picked it up to kind of see if at the point when the library discarded this, they were doing anything like stamping when they were discarding it, which I've never seen them do as a thing, but I kind of flipped through the book to see anyway. And because of that, I saw that in the back there is a picture of Casey Daniels in a graveyard, and it says, Casey Daniels once applied for a job as a tour guide in a cemetery. She didn't get the job, but she got the idea for this series. And I'm just like, huh, sucker, I've been a tour guide in 2 separate cemeteries. I mean, it was for the same job, 2 different tours of the same company, but still, being a tour guide in a cemetery is kind of fun sometimes. Anyway, I'm gonna get into what I expect to be a very hot mess, and I will update you as I go. If I didn't already know this book was published in 2006, I could tell by the fact that the main character's bust size is on the first damn page. I'm only on page 21 and she's mentioned her boobs 4 times. What the hell? I'm on page 88 and I swear to God every time a new dude comes into this book he has to check out her boobs and she has to tell me about it, and I'm just like, there are more interesting things going on, like a mafia don that died 30 years ago making you help him solve his murder. Maybe focus on that instead of telling me about your boobs and every time you sigh and how that does impressive things on your sweater. Like, I don't give a shit about your rack. I'm on page 137, and also it seems like every time she describes another woman, she describes her in a way that makes it very, very clear to the reader that that person is less attractive than her, and that's another thing I can't stand. Also how all the guys are really hot, and it's just like, can we not? I've come across a few sentences I don't really like in this book, but so far the one I like the least is, "The tension drained out of me like the fat off Oprah." We moved outside because it's a disgustingly beautiful day and we're having a bit of a picnic, and I think I'm gonna finish this book all in one day, which is unusual for me, but I need to, if that's that RC car that keeps coming around and when it gets hot I'm gonna be so mad. Basically, I need to get my reading skills back up before the Queer Lit Readathon, so I might as well read a whole book in one day. For the first time in a few months, I was actually going over the list of books I was meant to read for this project, and I realized that I've read one, but I didn't vlog about it because I forgot it was on this list. This is the problem with having multiple lists for multiple things. The book in question is Fearing the Black Body by Sabrina Strings. This one is about the racial origins of fat phobia, and it was absolutely fantastic, and I'm a little bit sad that I did not remember to actually include it. So what I think I'm going to do is just insert what I said about it in my weekly wrap up, because I definitely didn't vlog about it, and I'm very sorry about that. First this week I read Fearing the Black Body by Sabrina Strings. I believe the subtitle of this one is The Racial Origins of Fat Phobia. This is a book that's been on my list for ages, and a few different people have recommended it. One of it is my friend Sarah from the Costume Codex, and she just recently announced a new podcast called Real Fat People that will be coming out very soon. So if you're interested in fat phobia in media, please go follow her channel and then also follow the podcast. Fearing the Black Body is a very academic book about the origins of fat phobia throughout the times. This goes back to, I think, the Renaissance is when we started talking about it, mainly because that's about when we started seeing black people in European art. In fact, a lot more of this book is based on art history than I previously thought, but going into this book I didn't really have any preconceived notions of when in history we were starting. So since art and portraiture is a medium that still exists from these times, it makes sense to go back and think about the lives of these artists and the paintings themselves and what they tell us about the subject. Like I mentioned, this is a very academic text, so it might be difficult for some to get through it. I definitely struggled a few times because it's been a very long time since I've had to read something academic. However, it's definitely worth reading because the subject is very interesting. There are many points about this that I found very fascinating, but one of them is how fat bodies on women and men were treated differently and how that changed throughout different times. Different body types were also given different attributes, whether or not they were true about individual people, and those just stuck. And then eventually medicine came in and decided to reflect in its findings what people already thought about these bodies, which is bonkers to me. You would think this is scientific, and in many cases it's just not. Hi, it's been a decent amount of time, but I'm gonna update this vlog because I'm finally reading another book for it. Also, the sun is doing some things, try to ignore it. I am going to start reading the audiobook for the revival of Opal and Nev, I believe that's what it's called, and I'm gonna do some cross-stitching while I do it because I'm real into cross-stitching now. Good morning. I started listening to the final revival of Opal and Nev because I missed that one word in the title when I was talking about it earlier, and I'm really enjoying it. Firstly, the audiobook is full cast, which is exactly what you're going to want for this type of audiobook. This is written as though it's a journalist who is interviewing different people from the music scene, especially these greats named Opal and Nev. But we know right from the start that the journalist in particular has sort of a history with Opal. Not that she's actually ever met her until she starts interviewing her, but she does have a very deep family history to do with her. So right off the bat, that's interesting, and you want to know how things went down, basically. I'm very much enjoying it so far, and I can see why people would recommend this book for people who really liked Daisy Jones and the Six, because it's very similar in the stylings, and I'm very much enjoying it so far. Also, I got a little bit done on my cross stitch. I listened to a lot more of the final revival of Opal and Nev yesterday, to the point where I found out something quite interesting that might change the whole story. I'm really enjoying listening to this. I really think that it's meant to be listened to as an audiobook if you have the ability to do so, just because it is meant to be a oral history. It is these people telling you the story from their own lips, which it's just such a fascinating story to look into what these people were going through at the time, and also the context of the time frame they were living in, and how things were twisted and how things were used for gain or not. It's just so fascinating. Hello, it's been a while. I've taken a little bit of a break from the audiobook because I was watching way too many true crime things on YouTube, but I'm gonna get back into it. I have about 2.5 hours left, so I'm probably gonna finish it in this session. It's also just been way too hot for thinking, and I don't want to go through this just passively listening and not actually paying attention to it, because I feel like it's gonna have some form of resolution that I'm either gonna really love or have some other emotion about, so I really wanted to pay attention. I've also been doing a lot of cross-stitching. I finished the section I'm pretty sure I showed you that I was working on, and I've started a whole other section that is very similar but just turned for the corner, so I'm going to show you that, and I'm going to continue listening. Finish this heart, then down here I've started the hat for the next heart. It is no longer a safe temperature to be in the upstairs of my house, but I needed to stay up here just to finish off some cross-stitching before I go down to the basement, which is not much cooler. And also I was finishing the audiobook. I am so sweaty. As personally predicted, I absolutely loved the ending of this book. I really loved what happened, and yeah, it's good. I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed full cast audiobooks. I think this one was meant to be one, and I highly recommend it. It's really good. Hi, this isn't exactly a reading update, but it is related to this vlog. I saw that one of the little free libraries in my area had a copy of Frindle, because I follow their account on Instagram, so I had to go pick it up. It's also a really cute little free little library, so I will insert pictures of it. But I had to pick up a copy and, you know, drop off some of my bookmarks, just as a thank you for it. Hi, Chad and I are currently on a road trip. We're sitting outside a cafe in Golden, and I'm about to start Warm Bodies, which is on my 40 before 40 TBR, which you know because you're watching the vlog of me reading these books. This one was originally recommended to me by my friend Paige in 2018, and I'm finally getting around to it. All I really know about it is zombies, and I'm pretty sure it got made into a movie. Planes just like to go by when I'm vlogging. So I am about 50 pages through this. I'm enjoying it so far. I'm wondering how certain aspects of it are going to be handled, because the majority of people that have seen that I'm reading this are like, it's such a great love story, and how it is, I'm like, is it though? Will it be though? I need to see how it's going to play out so I can accurately figure out if I'm going to be annoyed by that description of it. Also, we're just sitting in line waiting at Mr. Loop to get the oil changed, which is where we are right now. Hi, Chad.
Hi. We saw two people walk around a vehicle and bump into each other, and it was hilarious.
And yeah, that's the update from this road trip that will have been like 4 years in the past by the time you see this vlog. So Chad and I are back in Victoria, and yesterday we went to a cafe we'd never been to before. We sat down, we were both reading our books, and I audibly scoff. And Chad's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I just got to a scene in this book that made it very clear that this is a very loose retelling of Romeo and Juliet, and I was not aware of this fact ahead of time. I got all the way to page 127, which was the balcony scene, and there was even some Shakespeare lifted directly from the original play, and I was like, oh my god, how did I not notice before, / how did nobody tell me? Somebody probably told me like 5 years ago when this was recommended to me, but I completely forgot. All I remembered was it was about zombies, and it was interesting, and the main character was a zombie. That's literally all I remembered. So that was fun to come across because I got, one, annoyed that I didn't notice before because certain little things clicked into place once we got to that part, and two, like, but why? But why? I finished it last night and overall I enjoyed it, but I also just wonder about the whole this is like a great romance thing, because Romeo and Juliet isn't exactly a great romance if you think about it either, so I have to wonder about that. I have to ponder more about that whole thought process about this book. I'm also really interested in watching the movies, so I'll probably do that at some point. Hello, 2 important life updates. The first one being that it looks like I was bit by a vampire. I have a couple of bug bites on my neck, and I scratched it like 3 days ago, and my skin is still red from that, so yeah, that's what's going on with that. I did learn, however, that you can make it not itchy by putting on aloe vera, so if you've never tried that before, you're welcome. The second update is I'm about to have my Wednesday tradition, which of course is my book bath, and I'm going to start Ghost Story, which was recommended to me by Amy from BookTube with Amy when we did a collaboration, I want to say a couple of years ago, but time means nothing, where I asked for people to give me their favorite ghost stories. This was hers. It's appropriately named. I'm sure at the time I looked into the plot and that's why I decided to pick it up. However, it's been some time. I don't know what the plot is. I don't know anything going into this besides it terrified her. So let's go do that. So I was just about to start chapter 1 and then it flashed in my mind that I think I know the premise of this book, and I'm going to tell you in case I'm completely wrong and it'll be hilarious later, but I think that Ghost Story is like a collection of people coming together to tell ghost stories and then something happens. I'm not entirely sure. I'll also link the collab down below so you can probably just find out from Amy's synopsis what it's about, but that also just makes me think of Midnight Club, which is definitely a book I read in my teens and has since been made into a Netflix show, and I haven't watched it yet, but I want to. The first thing that I noticed when I looked at the poster for it was there were too many people on the poster, because there's only 5 people in the Midnight Club in the book, but the poster has like 8 people on it, so I was like, I don't know what that does. I just know that it's gonna be different. Hopefully better, because as it turns out, teenage Kathy didn't really care that the shit she was reading was in fact shit. My tastes have grown since that part of my life, let's just say. It's fun to look back on, but they're not great books. I'm almost 90 pages into this book and I'm enjoying it so far. The first little section of it makes you feel like it's going to be a completely different book, but then you come to realize it's probably going to be one of the many stories that gets told. So I believe I mentioned earlier when I was in the bath the other day that I kind of remember what this is, and it's a bunch of old guys that get together and tell ghost stories, essentially. And yes, that is definitely part of it, but there's also mysteries involved because they talk about things that happened about a year ago, but you don't know exactly what happened. And then you're also seeing the perspectives of some characters who are coming into town, and you don't know exactly what that means for these people yet. You're also seeing them tell these stories, and whether or not they're true, you don't know, because nobody ever asks if the story being told is true or not. So it is an interesting premise. They're also having nightmares, which obviously is scary enough on its own. So I'm enjoying it so far. I'm wondering how it's going to go. I also didn't realize when I put this on my list that this horror book is over 500 pages, which is pretty rare outside of like Stephen King, who obviously needs an editor, but is just so compulsively readable that people just like will read his 1,000-page tomes. So there you have it. That is my update for now. I'm going to keep reading. So I'm about halfway through Ghost Story, and I don't know if I'm altogether super enjoying it. Like, I'm not actively hating it, but there's a lot of characters, and then a lot of them are killed off pretty quickly, so I don't really have an emotional impact about that, besides, like, it's sad when people die, but also these are fictional characters that I don't really have any connection to, so I'm like, okay. I don't know exactly what the hook is. Obviously I have some theories as to like the person that's behind it all, if they're even a person, they might in fact be a ghost. But I definitely thought this was going to center on at least a few characters, and now it seems to be like a whole ensemble thing where there's not really a main character, and I don't know that I'm 100% enjoying it. So, Ghost Story was just okay. I finished it yesterday. I kept almost falling asleep while finishing it, but I did really want to see how it ended because you get so far into a 500-page book and you feel like you need to finish it. So I did. Again, I talked about like the emotional response to it. Like I didn't really care that most of this very small town was dying because I didn't really know any of them. I didn't have a really big connection to them. Like obviously if I think about it too much I do care, all of that type of thing. But it was just okay for me. It just wasn't for me, and that is okay. Hello! I have no idea actually, but it feels like a very long time since I've read a book for this TBR, but here we are, I'm gonna do it. I actually realized that I had 2 books in my possession that take place in bookstores in Edinburgh, which is my favorite place in the world, and I was going to read the other one because I just picked it up recently because one of my subscribers had talked about just reading it, and I was just like, yes. But it's Christmas related, and I was totally fine with that. It's only January, it's still winter time. I was still gonna be okay with that, but as I went to go do that, I realized that I still have The Cracked Spine, which my friend Shelly sent to me and I haven't read yet. She sent it to me off my wish list. Thank you, Shelly, you're amazing. And I haven't read it yet, so because this one is shorter and I haven't finished a book this week, it's Wednesday, I've decided to pick this one up. Also being Wednesday, that means it's time for me to have a book bath, so I'm going to do that. Okay, I'm 2 chapters in and I am thoroughly entranced in the story. Delaney is working at a shop called The Cracked Spine, and it's in the Grassmarket, which is an area of Edinburgh I'm very familiar with because I used to take tours there all the time. That's actually where we'd have our lunch break, at one of the pubs there. So I can picture the square, I can picture where I think this shop is meant to be, and I am so excited. Like, if I hadn't had a job there as a tour guide, which I obviously loved as a theater kid, having a shop, like a bookshop to work in, would have been so cool. We've met a couple of characters so far. We've met a really cool taxi driver that is just so nice to her and like wants to introduce her to his wife, and they'll have dinner together. And then we've also met Hamlet, which is a teenager that works at the shop and also is an actor, and he's going to be doing a Shakespearean show because of course, why not, with a name like Hamlet. And then Rosie, who has this adorable tiny dog, and she also works there, and the tiny dog has come to the shop with her, so I'm already so into this and I'm excited to see where the mystery lies. So I'm just more than 80 pages into this and we finally figured out who has been murdered and some potential reasons, but not actually, you know, a definite reason and who would have done it. So I'm gonna make some coffee because I'm cold and continue. Took a good portion of the day, but I read the book, I enjoyed the book, I liked the book, it was fun. I love that this is the beginning of a series and I will maybe pick up more in the future. I'm really bad at continuing series, but I like how cozy this is and I like the characters, so I could see myself continuing along. Hi, it's been a while since I've updated this vlog because I definitely forgot about this TBR. Not so much forgot about, but kind of just put it to the wayside. However, I am currently traveling and I have still got access to different digital things from my library back home, and I figured I should figure out what I could possibly read right now. And it turns out the second thing on my list is Faust by Johanna Wolfgang van Goethe, is how I'm going to say that, G-O-E-T-H-E. And it turns out that the 3 places he would like to live, or he would have liked to live back in the past when he lived, were Weimar, Rome, and Carlo Vivari. And I am currently in Carlo Vivari, and there is a beer house in his name, so I'm gonna go listen to some of the audio recording of that there. Before I forget, I wanted to mention that I think I've read at least part of this play before, but I haven't since I was in university for theater, so I kind of remember it's probably a deal with the devil, but I don't really remember anything else to do with the plot of this. So we'll see how it goes. This is a 4-hour dramatization of it, so I'm excited to revisit it in that format. So while I was listening to the audiobook at the bar, I happened to spy a poster which really summed up the first part of the book, which read, "A guy gets so tired of reading meaning he sells his soul to Satan out of boredom, and that pretty much sums it up. And then it gets weird and gross because he gets a crush on a girl he says must be at least 14, and I'm like, you have like all the advanced degrees, so you've got to be in your 30s, I assume. I don't know. It doesn't give an age for him, but I feel like he's out of the range where he should be looking at teenagers. And then they fall in love because, of course they do, and gross. And you can tell this was written in 1828 when that was perfectly acceptable. And then he accidentally ends up stabbing her brother, who we see for like 5 seconds before he gets stabbed because they get in a scuffle, and then as the brother is dying, basically calls his sister a whore for literally no reason. Like, what the shit? The whole Faust going after a teenager thing didn't really surprise me because in the little bit of this synopsis about Goeth's life that was in the menu for the restaurant we were at, yeah, he fell in love with a 19-year-old in his 70s, and, no. So I finished Faust on the train. We went on a day trip to Mariinsky Latski, which is another spa town about an hour 15 minutes away, which was lovely. It was lovely to walk around. I did 25,000 steps. I also fell over, and Chad very graciously took video of me getting up, which, thanks. I asked him to check if my camera was broken, and that's what he did, but you know, it had to happen, I guess. I keep falling over. I did not understand the latter half of this play at all, so I'm gonna have to look up some Wikipedia stuff to find out what the hell I just read, because what the hell? I don't get it, and that's fine. Hello, we're in beautiful Constanta, and I'm about to start The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. I've purposely not looked up anything about this book because I don't want to be spoiled about how the mystery goes. So I know nothing about it, I just know it's another Agatha Christie. I don't even know if it's a Miss Marple or if it's a Poirot. I'm gonna find out. Also, we're about to go to a Greek place for Greek food because Chad really wants Greek food, and I'm very, very hungry, so this works out. So plans changed really quickly after I filmed that clip yesterday where I was gonna go to the Greek place and read this. The Greek place, it turns out, is closed. Even though Google says it's open, even though its own website says it's open, it was closed. So we went to a different restaurant. I ate an entire slab of hummus. It was great, but I didn't get any reading done because directly after that we actually went on an adventure with friends of ours who live here. So now that it's kind of a rainy day, I'm actually going to open the cover of this and get some of it read. So I haven't read a ton of Agatha Christie, but the weird thing I find about this one, and I don't know if it's a regular thing, is it's a Poirot book, but he is not the main character. One of the doctors in town is the main character. So we're seeing everything from his perspective, and then Poirot just happens to be retired and in the neighborhood, and nobody really knows he's a detective until suddenly there's something that really needs solving and somebody brings him in on it. And people have thought his name was like Mr. Poirot, or like something slightly other than his actual name. And he's like, it's fine, I don't want people to know who I am, so I'll just let them keep thinking I'm this person I'm not until somebody is like, actually I need your help. So I've found that interesting. This is also fun because there's so many different people who could have done the murder. It's one of those closed room murder mysteries, so I'm enjoying it, and I'm probably gonna finish it on the train tomorrow. Hello, I finished it. I didn't quite finish it on the train like I thought I might because I finished another book as well, but I finished it. I'm not gonna give away whodunit because that's just rude, but I'm glad I didn't know going into this because I actually guessed, and that was exciting. Like, I didn't completely puzzle out why the person did what they did, but I did puzzle out who done it, and I was really pleased with myself. And I kept thinking, oh, wouldn't it be really interesting if the person who did it was this person? And it was fun to see that actually play out. So if you've never read it, I actually really recommend this one. And that means I think I'm done 9 out of my 40 books. I would have to double check, but I think I'm at 9, which means I'm slightly behind schedule, but that's okay. Also, I guess I should tell you that I finished this in Brasov, which is in the Transylvania region of Romania. Hi, it's 9:30 on a Friday night, which is a perfect time to do a reading vlog. I think one of the reasons why it takes me so long in between updating you on this project is sometimes you just don't feel like vlogging, and then that's the reason you don't actually do this TBR. However, I recently put my 40 before 40 books on another project's TBR, which is the Bookish Bingo from Hell, and I need to do at least 10 of these books during 2024 or else I'm gonna fail that space and I'm gonna be sad about it. So we're gonna do the shortest book just because I wanted to get something done, and that's Frindle. This is a kid's book. It is very short. I've never read it before. It was on Ashley's channel a while ago, so I'm going to finally get to it. Honestly, the biggest reason why I'm getting this one done right now is because on Sunday I want to talk about it in my wrap-up, because I actually need to replace 2 books that were on this TBR because St. Martin's Press is doing some shit, and I don't want their books on my TBR anymore because then I can't talk to you about them, and that kind of makes doing a reading vlog of this experience not great. So hopefully when you see this vlog in the future, this has been resolved. In which case, if you don't remember this happening all the way back in 2023, one of their employees was posting very Islamophobic things, and we asked for some accountability from the publisher, and they doubled down with the, we're not gonna do that, or they just didn't pay any attention to us. And the terms of the boycott are very reasonable, and they're kind of scaring us by doing literally nothing to ensure our safety. So I'm not featuring their books on my channel or any of the books from their imprints on my channel, which means 2 of the books that were on this list need to be replaced. So I'm mostly going to read Frindle right now so I can get it done before I do my wrap-up on Sunday, so I can remind people to give me some more books to go on that list, because honestly I only ever got the list up to 39 and I needed to be at 40, which means with those 2 books I need to put 3 more books on that list. So yeah, this is just going to be a good way to remind people on Sunday that I need more suggestions, and hopefully somebody will come through. Hi, I'm only on the 6th chapter of Frindle, but I had to stop to go grab my robe because it's minus 10 degrees outside, which doesn't usually happen where I live. Usually it gets to like maybe 0 occasionally during winter. Anyway, I was cold is the point, so I had to get up and get my robe. So I figured I should stop and tell you about this. This book is really fun because there are certain things about it that I definitely relate to from my schooling, that kids these days will be like, what's a cassette player? What's a dictionary? What do you mean I can't just look that up on my phone? So basically this is about a kid who is in the 5th grade, and in the 5th grade he's got this teacher named Mrs. Granger, and she is the type of teacher who loves dictionaries. If you're like, what does that word mean? She will make you look it up in the dictionary. And he's a little bit of a shit disturber, like he knows how to waste time in a class so that you won't get homework assignments. So he tries doing that on the very first day and instead gets an assignment just for himself. So he decides to take that assignment and try to waste the next class by doing this really long report about dictionaries, and it's just going from there. It's basically him trying to best this teacher. What I really like about this is this character is very creative, and that's something that was celebrated in the 2nd grade, but now not so much. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how this plays out. Hello, I finished Frindle last night while I was in bed, so I didn't update you because I just turned over and went to sleep after that. But this went way further than I thought a kid's book would. It really talked about the implications kind of on a national level about this kid just making up a new word because his teacher basically told him that that's how words are made up, and then this whole battle that ensued as to whether or not this word would be recognized by the community at large. I thought it was really interesting. I thought this was really fun. One of the things that I also had to laugh at was they were getting their class picture taken, and instead of saying cheese, everybody in their class said Frindle and held out a Frindle, which is a pen. If you can't tell from the cover, that's what they've decided to now call that item. It's a Frindle. And the photographer ran out of film, so couldn't take another photo, and I was just like, oh dear God. Oh, this book is old, but I love it. Because I'm the type of person where when I went on my very first international trip, I took a film camera with me because my dad wouldn't let me borrow the family digital camera, even though I was 18 years old and a very responsible kid. So I took 12 rolls of film with me to Russia and filled those up. So, yep, that was a thing. Anyway, short, sweet, really enjoyed it, thought it was really lovely, and I think I'm gonna call them Frindles from now on, just because that's fun. Hi, I'm in the north of France and I'm listening to an audiobook that's on my 40 Before 40 TVR, so I guess I need to tell you about it. I'm finally listening to Beloved by Toni Morrison. This is my first book by her. I think I tried to read one previously and I just couldn't get into it, and I'm really scared of not liking something by this author because I know she is, absolutely no pun intended, beloved, so I'm really scared of like reading one of her books and then just not getting it or not liking it and all of that. I'm 17% in, or so the audiobook tells me, and there's a lot of characters, so I'm hoping that I'm tracking this properly. Essentially what's happening is we have these characters who are living in this house that is haunted by the death of what I assumed was a baby just based on how it was written, and I could have missed something because I was listening to this in a hot tub and there was some traffic noise, so I might have missed something. And basically what happens is somebody from the mother's past finds her at their house, and this is like in the late 1800s, I'm pretty sure, again if I listened correctly and the traffic noise didn't mess it up for me. And this brings back a lot of memories and kind of from the upbringing of what was going on at that time. So we're introduced to all of these vast amounts of characters from the past, but then we're also trying to figure out what's going on in the present, and yeah, I'm only 17% in. I'm enjoying it. I like the idea of a ghost story. But again, I have that fear of being that one person who just doesn't quite get it, and everybody figuring out that I'm not that smart. We'll find out. Also, I figured I had to do the update in the bathroom because, you know, bathroom updates and vlogs are a thing that I do. Hi, we're outside this time because I figured even though the sound is going to be worse, the picture will be way better than the bathroom vlog. I finished Beloved this morning while I was laying in bed. It was really good, and I'm really glad I enjoyed it because, like I said, I was scared that I wouldn't, just because there's certain books that are intimidating for no reason, especially when I knew nothing about it going into it. It's a haunting story, and it is incredibly haunting. It's incredibly traumatic. It's incredibly tough. There's a pigeon right next to me. Hello. And yeah, it's definitely an important read. I see why people heavily recommend it, and I think that you should read it if you've never read it before. It is the type of book where I really want people to just go into it and read it. And I know that seems like a cop-out because obviously I just want to get back to my tea and my banana bread and my reading of the new book, because in the background of me is our favorite cafe here in Bayou. But yeah, it's haunting. It's really sad. It's an incredibly sad story of what people have gone through for a very long time, and what that generational trauma can be like. And yeah, read it. It's good. I enjoyed it. Hi, I started a new book on the list, so let's talk about it, and not the fact that it's probably been a very, very, very long time since I've updated this reading vlog. Probably mentioned this before, but in case I haven't, I think the reason why I'm not getting through these books very quickly is because oftentimes I don't really feel like vlogging, so if something comes up in my holds list, I'm like, let's put it off a little bit. I don't feel like it. However, I just vlogged for an entire month last month for the Queer Lit Readathon, so I still have my vlogging feelings up. Let's do it. The book that I just started reading this morning on my morning walk and have continued reading while I'm eating my breakfast is Empire of Pain. This is all about the Sackler family, and basically right from their origins in the United States up until present day, or as close to present day as this book was published, and the opioid crisis that was caused by one of their products. At least that's the premise that we're told at the beginning of the book, with the deposition of Kathy Sackler, and then we're going back to the upbringing of her eldest uncle. So far I'm finding it very interesting. I'm about an hour and a half into the 17-hour audiobook, which means I'm definitely going to be able to use this for my bookish bingo board for hell for the over 400 page square. And this book is told in a very engaging way. For example, in the second chapter, we're introduced to this woman who comes over from Germany, and even though she was a doctor in Germany, she has to do a couple of internships before she's allowed to take the exam that doctors take. I can't remember what it's called right now. My brain is screaming at me that it's the bar, but that's for lawyers. In any case, because of that, she ends up meeting these brothers who are doctors, and she's later introduced to this older brother who is also a doctor, and they have this kind of romance going on, and you're really rooting for them because you assume that they're gonna get together because that would make sense in a book like this, and then you realize that he is already married, something we did not know previously. There's a bird losing its mind. This book is also read by the author, which is something I just personally love. So I'm going to continue. I'm probably actually going to listen to it while I work today because I can, so why not? Hi, it's the next day, and I thought it was going to take me a really, really long time to get through this audiobook because it's 17 hours, and usually my reading time is like a 45-minute walk in the morning, going to the gym, that type of thing. But for the past 2 days, I've just kept reading it, or listening to it, however you want to phrase that, after I've gotten home from my walk and while I've been working, in between when I actually have to do active things that I have to think about, and of course while I'm cross-stitching, because that's what I do. And I'm 71% of the way through this book, and it's just so compelling that I can't stop listening to it until my headphones actually get too tight on my ears and now my ears hurt. So that's the only reason I've stopped, and I was like, hey, maybe I should actually check in and tell you about this. This is such a thorough book, and I cannot imagine the mountains upon mountains of research that went into making this book a possibility. And also just, wow, this family takes zero accountability besides like being proud that they came up with the idea for Oxy. Like, just wow. They even go so far as to be adamant that it's not a problem until the patent is almost up and other people can make generic versions, and then they make like a tamper-proof version of it and then decide to tell everybody that the tamper-proof version is perfectly fine, but that old one is probably not fine, and therefore nobody should be able to get a new patent to be able to make a generic version of it. And then they kept selling that version of it in Canada for a year, and it's well documented that people were going over the border into Ontario to buy it and bring it back to the States. So just wow. Just wow. Like, it's really fun to think about how cool your life would be if you could have like a house in Turks and Caicos and just spend all your time traveling and do all the various other things that Sackler members do. But at what cost? My God. Hi, you might not be surprised to find out that I finished the book today. A book I thought was going to take me over a week to read because it was so long, took me less than 3 days. This is incredibly well researched. There are certain parts of it that you're just going to be so mad about when you get to them if you read this book, and I cannot highly recommend it enough because just wow. I love narrative nonfiction, and this is very good, very compelling narrative nonfiction, so I can highly recommend this. I finished it on an epic walk this Saturday morning because I was gonna go to the gym this morning, but I went to the gym last night and I woke up and all of my muscles were like, what did you do to me? So walking was my course of action today instead of going back to the gym and lifting more weights. Hi, I bet you didn't expect to see me so quickly, and yet here I am. I had another hold come up and be like, hey, I'm ready for you, and I was like, I guess it's finally time to bite the bullet and do the first thing that was added to this list by somebody who I feel like was probably trolling me and probably hasn't read this themselves. I'm now going to go for a walk and start listening to War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, which is 61 hours as an audiobook. Hence why I think I'm being trolled. This was added to my list by somebody who I know through theater on my Facebook. So Darcy, you're probably not watching this because you probably don't watch my videos, but screw you. And yes, this is the unabridged version, so let's see how I do with it. I know basically nothing about this. I know it's a Russian classic. That's all I got. I can tell you that I've actually been to Russia before, so let's see if this is either in Moscow or St. Petersburg, because I've been to those places, or whatever St. Petersburg was at the time of publishing this. I don't even know when this is set. Let's see if I can even get partway through this before noping out. Hello, I am 10 hours into this audiobook, which is 17%. I kind of figure I have to read at least 10% per day in order to be able to wrap this up in my next weekly wrap-up, which of course is the most important metric as to when I should get this book done by, because if I don't, I won't have an audiobook to wrap up next week, which would just be weird because that's never happened since I switched over to reading audiobooks instead of listening to podcasts like 6 years ago. This is set up not only in chapters but in parts, so I've just gotten to part 3. And what I've decided to do is I'm going to continue to read this book. I'm gonna listen through it all the way. I am doing it at a little over 2 times speed just because there is so much to get through. And I'm understanding things here and there, and I am enjoying some of the turns of phrase every once in a while, so sometimes I'm like, ah yes, I see what the author's trying to do here. But overall, there's a lot of sections where I'm just like, I don't care. There are too many people. I don't care about all the mechanics of war, so why I decided that I needed to put this on my list, I'm not entirely sure. It's because I was getting other people to pick the books, that's why. But what I am going to do is read the Sparks notes for every part once I finish the part. So I'm just about to sit down and read the Sparks notes for part 1 and part 2 because I've just gotten to the beginning of part 3. And hopefully anything that kind of went over my head while I was listening but kind of not listening, you know how your brain can just kind of float away when it's like, I don't care about this situation whatsoever. I'm gonna see if I can pick up anything that I really should have picked up the first time around and kind of test myself on what happened because, like I said, I don't really care. I know that there's like this guy that doesn't like his wife and wants to go off to war. I know there's these other people that did some foolish things and now they're being punished. I know there was this guy that was an illegitimate heir and his dad died, but his dad made him legitimate before he died, so he inherited and now everybody's treating him nicely. Like, I'm getting the gist of what's happening, but I don't really care. So yeah, I'm gonna read some Sparks notes and I'm gonna have to listen to more of this when I go to and from the gym later in order to make it up to 20% for the day. Good morning. I've basically hit the halfway mark of this book and I still don't really care, and there's still too many characters and it's over way too long of a time. And I think it's the fact that, like, I have no reason to like these characters. Like, it doesn't go into much depth about these characters. Like, I can understand some of them are expressing like these really big emotions, but because there's no groundwork, I don't care. I am behind on reading my book summaries though, so I've just gotten to the 9th book of the book. I hate how books were set up like this. You needed a different word for this. But I haven't read 4 books 5, 6, 7, or 8, so I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna do something else with my time for a while, and then I'm gonna have to read more of this because I need to read another 10% of it today. Hi, it's Saturday, aka the day I should have finished War and Peace by, and I finished it. Guess what? The prologue itself is over 4 hours. That's some bullshit. So by the end of this, I was listening to this at 3 times speed, which I've literally never done with another book before, but it's done. I did it. There were way too many characters. I didn't care about a lot of things that were happening. There was some interesting introspection about like the nature of war and that type of stuff, and actually the second half of the prologue, part 2 of the prologue, because again the prologue was real long, was all about, like, we like to think that like big historical figures did certain things, but really like they existed and then we just decided that they were the will of the people or whatever at the time, or they gave an order and that order wasn't even completed, but because of whatever happened after that order it was decided that this happened or that happened, and it's just like, sure, whatever, I don't care. Also, the first half of the prologue I did not need at all because it was like, oh yes, and then this couple went on to have 4 children and this is how they were breastfed, and I'm like, I don't care. But now I can say I've read War and Peace, so that's good. Check another one off my list. Let's move on. Good morning. I'm about to start another one of my books on my morning walk, so I will tell you about it once I've actually come back from that walk. It's early, I'm tired, and this is my first morning walk in a little while because I've gotten out of the habit. Not too far out of the habit, maybe like a week, but still it feels like it's been ages. I'm back. So In Memoriam is a book that takes place during the First World War in England, and basically this guy was just bullied into joining up, even though he's not old enough, and you can just say how old you are when you're recruited, because the women are like, oh, sure, you're not old enough yet. You're just a coward who's not doing it. Also, his mother and sister came to visit him and were like, if you don't join up, everyone's gonna think that we're German sympathizers because, you know, your mom's German, so, like, you have to go to this war. And it's just like, what the hell? Like, I don't understand war to begin with, but to be like, you know what? You should just go die because it'll be better for my marriage prospects. No. These 2 teenage boys who have been forced to become men because they're now in a war are at the front lines together, and they are so in love with each other, and each other doesn't know, and it's just so frustrating because, like, just be in love already. I mean, you are in love, but, like, understand you're both in love. I hope it ends well. I have no idea. Hi, I've just sat here listening to the rest of In Memoriam, and my goodness, is this book one
good to sickening. Like, there were several parts where I was listening to this where I just felt sick to my stomach over what was happening to these various characters. I'm not going to ruin this for you. I'm not going to tell you how it goes. I'm just going to say I learned a lot about the British class system. Or maybe not a lot, but like it made me think more deeply about it in the context of this time frame. And in particular, listening to this as an audiobook is interesting because there are sections where there will be just listings in the newspaper of people who are dead or wounded or missing in action. And those sections are read in such a way where it's just the names echoing off each other, and I think that was done really, really well. So, can definitely recommend, but only if you can stomach it, because if you're anything like me, you don't often seek out stories about war because they're devastating. Hi, I'm about to head to the gym, and I'm also about to start the audiobook for The Color Purple. So, yeah, that's a thing that's on this list, so I gotta get to it. I also picked it because one of the Read Queer All Year prompts for this month is something that has an adaptation, and I know that this has a musical adaptation. I think there's at least one movie. I think there's another movie that's a movie of the musical. But other than having seen some random amazing singing clips from the original Broadway cast members, I know nothing about this book, so I'm excited to get into it.
Excuse my French, but that book does not fuck around. From the very beginning, firstly, it's narrated by the author, which I always love. Secondly, from the very, very first chapter, the very, very first page, you know that the main character, Celie, is being inappropriately... I'm trying to think of the way I can say this on YouTube and not, like, have it hate me immediately. Her father is doing her, and it results in children. So, you know, from the first page, you know that. She does not have an easy life. Well, let's just say that. That's happening. She's having to look after her kids. She's trying to make it so her little sister also isn't in that position, and somebody wants to marry her little sister, but her dad won't let her little sister marry this guy, so she has to go marry this guy and take care of his kids, and, yeah, it's a whole thing. This is an intense book. I'm enjoying it. I really enjoy the narrator. I really enjoy, not the narrator like Alice Walker herself, but I enjoy the narrator like Celie's voice. I enjoy being from her perspective. But yeah, it's not for the faint-hearted, let me just say. Hi, it's in the evening, and I just finished The Color Purple, which I very, very much enjoyed. This is not a story for the faint-hearted. It's definitely a story that goes over a very long lifespan for Celie, and it's mostly written in letters to God. That's who she's talking to at the very beginning, and then eventually she also starts writing to her sister Nettie, and she actually gets letters back from Nettie, but there's kind of a time-lapse situation going on. I don't want to tell you too much more than that, other than I'm really interested to see the adaptation of this now that I've actually finally read the book. Also, I'm in the middle of making vegan shakshuka. I've never made it before, I've never had it before, vegan or not vegan, so it's a fun time, but I'm actually doing it for a project that at this point in my life is brand new, and I've never done one of these videos before, but by the time this comes out, hopefully I'm still doing my seasonal sample videos, because I've decided to start doing something every season, just like a new hobby that I'm picking up, and this time around is the first time around and I'm picking up cooking. Because I have this playlist of all of these recipes that I want to try, and I very rarely actually try them, so that's what we're doing. Also, I just came back from the gym, that's why I look like this, whatever, doesn't matter. So in case you're curious, the shakshuka is basically just like this, which is tomatoes and bell peppers and some garlic, and you're supposed to put onion in there, but I'm allergic to onions, so nope. And then there's also chickpeas, which isn't traditional apparently, but that's fine. And then what this is this simmers for a while, and then you're supposed to put eggs in it and let it simmer longer, and the way we make it vegan is a block of tofu that has been pulverized with a bunch of oat milk and some nutritional yeast and some spices and that type of thing, and then that's going to go in the quarter of each pan, and then that's going to bake for that's going to cook on the stove for like 10 minutes, and then I'm going to eat it with a bunch of bread, and I'm very excited about it. Also, I have the house to myself tonight, which is a very rare occurrence, which is why I was like, I can make this now, because I was going to make it over the weekend, but I can do it now, and I'm not in anybody's way. In any case, I hope future me continues to make the seasonal sample videos that I've just talked about, but you'll know better than me whether or not that happened.
Hi, it's time for me to read more for this vlog, and today I'm reading The Seep. In fact, I read the first part of it while I was having brunch by myself in a diner at the counter, having some coffee, having some vegetables. It was good times. This book is about an alien invasion, and the beginning of it is about throwing a dinner party at the beginning of an alien invasion and then figuring out what that alien invasion entails, which is mostly as soon as you've interacted with this alien species at all, be it through the water system like most people or through touch, everybody's just kind of susceptible to this thing called the seep, which is the name of the book, you might have noticed. And it's kind of weird because you can get high on the seep, so you can spend hours upon hours or days upon days just like contemplating life. You can use it to do things like shrink tumors without invasive surgery, or you can use it to do things like grow angel wings and unicorn horns. And in the first section of this book, not only does our main character find out that somebody she's known for like 20 years did it 20 years ago to do something she finds incredibly racist, which it is. She also finds out that her wife wants to go back to being a baby and doesn't understand why she feels like she's being left behind if her wife is going to do that. It's a very interesting concept. I don't know what to think about everything so far, but I'm enjoying it, so I'm going to continue reading. In a fun turn of events, for the first time in a long time, I finished that whole novel in one afternoon. It was quite a trip. It had a lot to say about the human condition, and even if things changed, how some things would stay the same, and how other things would definitely change, but did they change really that much? And this is the type of novel that I feel like I will have to sit on and think about a bunch, and I'm feeling very overwhelmed by it, but I'm glad I read it. I also have 2 other books out from the library that are on this list, so I will probably see you very soon. Hi, it's me again. If it was someone else, that would be really weird. I mentioned before that I have 2 more books out from the library that are on this list, so I'm going to tell you about them, and I'm going to start reading both of them around now-ish. One of them I'm going to start reading on a walk because it's actually nice outside, which is very rare, so when it is nice, I like to go outside. That means I'm going to start listening to Nosferatu, and I know very little about this besides, I assume vampires based on Nosferatu. Also, I know Joe Hill is Stephen King's kid, which makes it really funny that I happen to be wearing this beautiful Pennywise Van Gogh amalgamation on my shirt. Also, I finally came into my bisexual destiny and bought a plaid shirt for the first time a couple months ago, so you're welcome. If somebody can now figure out some vegan lemon bars for me, because apparently lemon bars are a thing, drop that recipe down below in the comments. The other book that I'm going to read physically is Carrion Comfort. I don't know anything about this besides it's apparently a mystery thriller. It came from the adult section of the library, and when I was looking it up to put it onto my Goodreads My Storygraph, I found it's the second in a series, so I don't know exactly why a random person from the internet decided that I needed to read the second book in a series for my 40 Before 40 TBR. However, I'm assuming this is kind of like, basically if you go into reading like any Nancy Drew book, you can read any Nancy Drew book, it doesn't matter which order in the series you're reading them. Sure, there might be a little bit of stuff that they tell you about from the first book, but like I'm pretty sure I'm not going to go into this and be really confused. Unlike that one time I read a William Gibson book and I was very confused. I had no idea what was going on, and it turned out it was the second book in a series. However, apparently also that's just a thing with him, so who knows? In any case, that's a really long-winded way of saying I'm finally gonna go outside because it's nice out. Maybe I'll show you some views, maybe I'll carry you in my pocket in case some stuff happens in the audiobook. But mostly all day I've been working on this cross stitch, which is lovely. It's a great little Halloween scene, and I'm excited to maybe get it done by the end of the month, but I don't know, there's a lot of stitches left, so we'll find out. I'm 15 seconds into this audiobook. I haven't even put my shoes on properly yet. I haven't even left the house, but I already have to tell you, I would have gotten to this book a lot sooner if I'd known that it's narrated by Kate Mulgrew. That's cool! Listen to the first couple of hours of Nosferatu, really enjoying it. You can definitely tell that he's read his dad's stuff and it feels like it's an homage to some of his dad's stuff, but here we are. I just started Carrion Comfort, I'm just in the prologue, and it looks like, assuming that the prologue is where it's set, this is set in Scotland, so I'm excited because I love Scotland. Hi, I should probably update you on both the books I'm reading right now. The book I'm listening to, as you know, is Nosferatu, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm really seeing a lot of nostalgia for kind of the 80s and early 90s, which is when it's set, or at least this portion of it is set. And it's really cool seeing these different pocket universes, except for they're not really pocket universes, but there are these objects that people use so that they can do special things, which is kind of cool. And we've already met a really cool punk librarian with a stutter, and I just want all the fan art of her because she seems so cool. As for Carrying Comfort, which is what I'm reading in the bath right now with a can of Raven Cream Ale, because I have a sense of humor that's morbid. I didn't explain it on my Instagram, but I will explain to you that there is a body found in this because, you know, murder mystery, there's gonna be a body found, but it was found by humans after it was found by ravens. So, you know, some of the soft bits are gone. Anyway, this is set in a very small northern Scottish town where everybody knows everybody and everybody's in everybody's business, and I really like that about it because we head hop a lot between these different characters. We get these little bits of the story, and I'm really interested to see how it all plays out because I'm so interested just to know who did it. Like, everybody's connected a little bit, and I want to know what happened. Get yourself a partner that delivers Pilsner and pie as a mid-bath snack.
This is actually perfect weather for my next book, which is called Carrion Comfort. This is a book that takes place on the north coast of Scotland, which typically has this type of weather, although in the beginning of this book it's nice and hot and people are confused. Because that's how it goes in Scotland. Either it's raining and you're like, this is typical, or it's nice and you're confused. This is a murder mystery book, and it's actually the second in a series. I haven't read the first one, but my library does have it, so I'm going to go back and read that now that I've read this because I really enjoyed the writing style. This is the type of book that takes place in a very small town, and we actually hop between the heads of several people in this small town and the big-time police people that are called in from Edinburgh to solve this murder. What I really loved about this is I had no idea who done it until it was really revealed in the book, and then you start getting scared because you're like, oh no, if it's that person, what's going to happen? Is somebody else gonna get murdered? This one is also really, really tricky because it becomes obvious that where the body was found was not where the body was killed. And it becomes this thing of like, why would the body have been moved? And who moved it? And why? We also have a lot of interpersonal dynamics, not only between people that live in this village, but the cops themselves. Get between the cops that are from Edinburgh, because a couple of them have worked together, and I imagine that happened in the first book, so I'm gonna figure that out once I read that. But then also trying to work with the local force and how the local force doesn't really like that they're there, and all of those types of things. I absolutely adored how this was written. I really enjoyed getting to know this whole cast of characters. So if, like me, you would like to read a murder mystery that's very atmospheric and very much up in everybody's business, I highly suggest this one. Hi, I finished Nosferatu yesterday and then completely forgot to tell you about it because I'm staying with friends and family and I finished it in the car on the way here, that type of thing. So, I really loved it. Also, there's this section at the end of the audiobook where Joe Hill talks about kind of this idea of having an interior world and exterior world, and also the fact that he learned so much from reading his mother's novels, which I really love that he said, because obviously we all know who his dad is, but people forget that his mom is also a novelist, and I have wanted to read her stuff for ages, so that's just a reminder that I should probably do that at some point. If you're on the fence about reading this at all, like I said, the audiobook, Kate Mulgrew, cannot go wrong. She is a fantastic narrator for this book. The only other time I've listened to her read a book, it was her own memoir, which is Born with Teeth, and that was also amazing and harrowing at points. And I'm going to have to look up more, narrated by her, but I can highly recommend this book. This is a fantastic take on a vampire novel and then has all of these other cool elements to it.
Hi, it's not a Kathy vlog if we don't have a segment from the bathroom, which is probably something I've said like 4 times in this video already, but here we are. You might be able to notice this is not my bathroom. This in fact isn't even a bathroom in my country. I'm in Japan, which can be evidenced by the Japanese toilet situation. Well, in Japan, I decided that the book that I should read is The Wind Up Bird Chronicle, because it's on my 40 before 40 TBR, and it takes place in Tokyo, which is where we are right now. This went on my list, and then I realized I've actually read 3 other books by this author, and I didn't particularly like any of them. The first one I read, it was just kind of weird, and I didn't know how to feel about it, and then South of the Border, West of the Sun, and Killing Commandatori are both books that I've read in audio format on road trips, and I really just don't like the writing by this author.
But here we are. And the whole reason this actually went on my list is because my partner's twin actually recommended this book to me 13 years ago, and he's always wanted to go to Japan and finally got a passport, so now we're in Japan and I'm reading the book he recommended to me. I'm not enjoying it though, because I find it so boring. The first thing that I found out in the introduction, which I skipped through because this is already a 600-page book and I already know it's going to be boring and repetitive as shit because I've read other things by him before, is that this is a companion novel to South of the Border, West of the Sun, which, as I've already stated, I didn't really like because it was boring. Another thing about his writing is he likes to talk about the boobs of literally any female who comes onto page at any time, and we didn't even get properly to the actual chapter before boobs were mentioned, because they were mentioned in the kind of title of the first chapter. So, you know, there's that. There was also a section in one of the chapters that something was being described as overwhelming numbness, and I was like, yeah, that's this book. And when I was having my Wednesday bath last night, the title heading was Death in a Bathtub, and I was like, well, that's just better not be foreshadowing. I've actually been reading this book for the last couple of days, although it's hard to think of exactly how long I've been reading it because time zones are weird because we're 17 hours ahead of BC time, but I'm still working on BC time. So right now I'm working at 5:14 a.m., but back home it's like 12:14 p.m. yesterday. But I've only made it a quarter of the way through this book, and if I want to finish it by the end of this week so I have something to talk about in my weekly wrap-up, I need to step up the pace because it's already Thursday. Yes, that's how that works. So I'm going to continue. But yeah, just as an example of the overwritten quality of this, he'll go on about things like, after I quit my job, I quit smoking because I thought I should quit smoking, but then also I kind of wanted to smoke, so then I got these lemon drops, and lemon drops are pretty good. I like to eat lemon drops, especially when I'm thinking about smoking, and sometimes I think about smoking and then I don't want to smoke, or I just don't have cigarettes, so I have a lemon drop instead, and they've got this kind of gooey center in the center of the lemon drop, and I'm just like, oh my god. No! And that's what this entire book is. So, wish me luck. Hi, I finished this novel. It was really long and really boring. Also, I skimmed the last probably 30% because I did not care. I just wanted to like know how it ended, and mostly I just read a synopsis of the last little bit. I was also really confused because I was like, how does this connect with South of the Border, West of the Sun? And it really doesn't. He wrote something for this and it didn't end up really working, and then he extracted it and made a completely different novel, and that's how they're connected or something. Yeah, his writing's not for me. I asked James, the person who recommended this to me, if he had actually read it before recommending it, and he had, and I asked him what he liked about it, and he liked that it was weird. So, yes, it was that. Fair. It was just incredibly overwritten. Like I said before, I cannot with how repetitive this is. But yesterday, we did transfer through Shinjuku Station, which is apparently the most populous train station in the world, or subway station, one of those. I think Chad was saying that 3.59 million people go through there every single day. And it was mentioned a bunch in the book while I was reading it on the train, so that was fun. Also, hi, I'm sick, I got a cold while we're here in Japan, and James has a fever, so like, hopefully the rest of the trip is better. We're out of Tokyo now. Google Maps, where am I? We're in Shiroguri. I knew that, but I just couldn't remember. We're here for like 4 nights, and then I believe we're going to Nara, and then we're going back to close to the airport. And so that will be really close, and we'll have to go through subway hell to get to the airport on the day that we leave, because honestly, yesterday, it took us over 3 hours of subway hell just to get to the train station to leave Tokyo to come here. Which was exacerbated by the fact that we went to get onto one of the trains and 2 of us made it on the train and the 3rd person didn't because the doors closed. And that of course was the person with hearing and vision impairment, and we had to furiously message between ourselves being like, okay, get on the next train and we'll get on too when we see you. And then we didn't see him, so he had to go to the next station, get off, and then we had to get on the next train, go to the next station, get off, go find him, and then all together get on a train together. So we saw a lot more subway stations than we're meaning to. And I feel like that is a way more interesting story than what I just read.
Hello, we are into the third year of this project because it is the 1st of January 2025 and I'm about to read another book. I'm about to start it. I'm also in my best friend's house. We're having a sleepover, but it falls on a Wednesday and she has one of the best tubs I've ever seen in my entire life. So I'm gonna hang out in it while she makes dinner. Also, this quilt is just adorable. So here we are, and we are going to be reading Ghost Mortal and having a cocktail in this really deep tub, like it comes up to just past my knee, and I love it. Okay, quick update before I go up for dinner. I'm only a few pages in, but from what I gather, at this point somebody has found a cure for aging. Not a cure for death, but a cure for aging. It's only legal in 4 different places, and so far the Pope has been like, yeah, you're gonna get excommunicated, and a lot of people are like, nobody's gonna care. And our main character lives in, I assume, New York, based on the fact that Rikers was mentioned, and is currently in the process of getting it. And we know from the very beginning that this person keeps meticulous logs about it, and it's basically a first-hand account of it, and whether or not it should be a thing that is still legal 70 years later, and I'm intrigued. Hi, I'm only about 60 pages into this, but I figured I should do an update. It's already brought up a lot of really interesting things about how society would work if suddenly people didn't age anymore. Not to mention things like who has the right to have this cure, and then people being against the cure, and trucks going by making really loud noises outside my window, because that's never gonna stop. Because there's certain people in this that are pro-death. Pretty much immediately upon finding this out, attacked the doctor that accidentally came up with this cure. But then our main character is a lawyer, and he's apparently now going to be switching into divorce law because a lot of bankers and really rich people are like, well, I got married 20 years ago, but I want it annulled because when I got married, I didn't know that this cure was going to be a thing, and now I'm going to be connected to this person forever, and I don't want them to get my money, so now I want an annulment. And I'm just like, why are people so horrible? And then it also has to do with kids and how kids will have to eventually get it if they want to get it, if the whole society is getting it, but they can't get it before they're 18 because that would be ridiculous, because then half society would just be under 18-year-olds. Giving a cure like this to kids wouldn't be ethical, because then you just get the creeps who just want to be with people who are kids, but then these kids are actually like 30 years old, and that's just gross and weird, and I don't like that at all. Basically, it's coming up with a lot of questions that I hadn't thought of before, because I hadn't thought of the possibility of a cure for aging being a thing. So even though I'm only 60 pages in, I'm very interested in what's going to happen.
Hi, I'm in the car and filming on my phone because I'm waiting for an oil change, and I'm one of those people that brings a book with me everywhere I go, which was very amusing to the person who was like, it's gonna be like 45 minutes. I'm like, I got a book, it's fine. Anyway, trolls in a world where people can't age, but can definitely be hurt, are terrible. And the fact that trolls actually exist in our day and age that will be like, oh, this person died, let's harass their family. That's fun. That's a thing that actually exists, and it's even worse in something like this. Actually, no, it's not, because this is fiction, but you know what I mean.
Hi, another change of location. We're in a cabin in the woods with no cell service or anything like that. It's wonderful. We love coming here because then we don't have to do work. I finished it. It's incredibly depressing. It is a really good speed run through 70 years of what happens if somebody doesn't age, and how society would go to hell, and it makes me feel really bad about society just in general. So, there's that. There was a decent amount of dude writing in this. Just certain things like just having to talk about bodies and random characters who aren't even named, like having sex for no reason, and just things like him being like, yeah, no, I'm totally not gonna ever want to get married to anybody, and then wanting to get married just because somebody's hot, and yeah, so things like that. But also, I feel like I'm gonna be thinking about this one for a really long time, because my god, just the thought experiment of this is quite interesting. So I'm glad I read it. I think I liked it, but also this is not the greatest time of year to read it, because I'm already depressed. Now it's making me more depressed. Hello, it's a beautiful winter day. It's not quite spring yet. Spring doesn't happen for another couple of weeks, but it's beautiful out, so I'm going to read outside, and I'm going to start reading The Apollo Murders. I know nothing about this besides the author is a Canadian astronaut, and I assume there's going to be murders in space or something like that. I was also very smart, and I'm picking this up for Galaxy-a-thon, which is the first read-a-thon I'm doing in ages that I'm not personally hosting, so let's get on it.
So the funny thing about my TBR for Galaxy-a-thon that I've just now realized I really didn't have to go through Chad's shelves to pick off a couple of books that might tick off the astronaut on the cover challenge. This book ticks that off technically. There's not an illustrated or a picture of an astronaut on a cover, but literally Chris Hadfield is an astronaut and the word astronaut is also on the cover. So I feel like this ticks off every challenge, I think, with the exception of probably Alien Encounter, because this one seems to be based on, you know, real events, but I don't know. I'm only like 70 pages in, who knows? Now that I'm more than 100 pages into this, I guess I should probably talk about what this is. So the bulk of this so far is taking place in 1973, and basically they are trying to do Apollo 18 as a mission, and this mission was just supposed to be like the last time they go up to the moon, do things, come back. But it's been hijacked by different people in the government who are like, well, actually the Russians are putting up this thing and we're pretty sure that thing is going to take pictures of us. We don't want it to, so you're going to have to sabotage it while it's in space. And so far we've got a perspective from somebody in Russia who's like, ah, yes, excellent. Somebody who is on this team is somebody who I basically started out as a plant like 10 years ago. So this random person on this team is definitely going to do things that I want them to do, and you don't know who it is. So that's the mystery aspect of it. And somebody has so far already died and they've had to replace somebody on the team and all of that. Now that I'm out of the bath, I'm going to keep reading this because I'm very, very excited about it. And because I needed a snack, I'm going to eat a couple of these Kit Kats we picked up while we were in Japan a couple of months ago. Hi, I'm about halfway through the book. I'm really enjoying it. So many shenanigans are going on, and like so many little pieces that you kind of saw and then kind of forgot about because it's from a perspective you're like, why is this person even here? And then it's picked back up, and that's kind of cool, so I'm enjoying it. However, I find myself really wanting to continue cross-stitching because it's the thing I do, but also wanting to read the book. So I got the audiobook out of the library. So now I'm going to listen to the audiobook while I cross-stitch for a little while, and then just make sure that I know exactly which chapter I end on so I can go back to the physical book when I want to, when I don't want to be using my hands to be making a cross-stitched cow situation. This is what I'm making. You can't really tell what it's gonna look like, but that's what it's gonna look like. I'm only on the first color, so I got a long ways to go. However, this guy only took me 3 weeks, so who knows how long it's gonna take, but look how cute the details are. Look at it. It's great. By the glow of my crafting light, I come to tell you that I have finished the book, and it was quite excellent. So much happens, so many different motivations here, there, and everywhere, and I love that there's a section at the end that actually talks about like the people that were from actual history in this, because at the beginning it's like, oh yeah, some of the people in this and some of the things in this are real, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna have to look that up later, but fortunately the book actually tells you which parts were real and which parts were definitely made up. So I highly recommend this one. Hello, I'm going to start reading another book very, very soon. I need to start it tonight for a very specific reason. The book in question is the Percy Jackson book, The Lightning Thief, that's what it's called. The first Percy Jackson and whatever the heck started the whole empire of those books, because there's like 20 some of them. I'm specifically starting this one today because a couple of days ago my best friend sent me a message being like, can you keep me accountable? I really want to read through all of those Rick Riordan books that start with the Percy Jackson books, The Lightning Thief. I want to read all of them, but I need somebody to keep me accountable. Otherwise I'll just like read like 5 and then wander off and do something else because ADD. And I was like, I can do you one better. I'll read the first one with you as a buddy read. So she gets off work like now, basically, and because my hold for the audiobook came in, she's like, can we start reading tonight? And I was like, yeah, we can do that. Okay. I'm only being hesitant because right now there's a live stream for Everything is Tuberculosis, which is a book that I'm currently just like waiting at my window going, okay, my copy's out for delivery. Is it gonna come? Not that I'm not reading another book right now, but I just kind of want to have hands on it. And then secondly, I'm currently obsessed with a show called Shetland, and I went for my daily walk, which means I'm allowed to watch episodes of Shetland. So I'm like, I should start this book right now. but I want to do these other things, but I think I'm gonna maybe listen to the first couple of chapters just to at least start, so when her messages start coming through to me, I'll have something to say, and then we've decided that we're going to preface each of our messages about it, just basically being like, okay, yeah, I'm up to this point, so if one of us hasn't been to that point yet, we don't listen to the message or read the message, depending on if we feel like voice noting or texting, that type of thing. And yeah, it's gonna be a fun experience because, you know, this is one of those series that I just never got around to. I've never read any of them. I haven't seen the movie. I was told that you shouldn't anyway, I think is what people have told me. I don't know. Or maybe there was a TV show and they didn't like it, or the other way around. I don't know. Somebody tell me in the comments, because we all know I'm not going to look it up. But yeah, one way or the other, I will get back to you after I've read at least a couple of chapters, and hopefully Taryn has also given some input so I can tell you what she's thinking of the book too. Oh, and just for another little snapshot of this moment in my life, let me show you the cross stitch I'm working on, because it's something I kind of designed myself and I've just been working on when I do things in the basement. I have a cross stitch upstairs and I have a cross stitch downstairs because that's the life I'm living. But let me show you what it is. It's this really cool geometric pattern that has 8 different colors in it. I know that the 2 yellows are very similar, but they're not exactly the same. And what's basically going to happen is there's going to be 9 different squares that are all the same design, but the colors move by 1 every time you go over. So if you take a look at this blue color here is in the center of this one here, is in not quite the center, is in further out, is in further out, and it kind of does that. But there's going to be 9 of them. I'm working on the second one. There will be 3 more down here, and I just think it's gonna look cool. These are the types of things you do when you're like, I have supplies, let's craft. All right, let's do this. Update the first. This came while I was listening to the first 5 chapters. Now I'm going to try to simultaneously give you my update on the first 5 chapters and record a voice note for Taryn, because that seems like a very good idea. Hello! So I've listened to the first 5 chapters, so if you haven't done that yet, maybe don't listen to this. Firstly, I'm excited about this because I probably knew at some point that this had ADD rep, but I forgot. So I'm sure that you will have specifically some interesting things to say about that, given, you know, your own ADD. Secondly, I think this is cool. I'm enjoying this whole aspect of, like, we've kept this from you, but we've tried to keep you in, like, the mortal schools for some reason, but now it's not going to happen. I really did not enjoy. But I did enjoy that it wasn't, like, graphic, because obviously this is middle grade, so that would be real gross. And mostly I'm pissed off that Dionysus is a douchebag, because, you know, being the god of theater and wine, he's kind of my favorite, so that's a problem for me. But other than that, I'm really enjoying it. I think I am, however, going to make a little bit of a pause right now to watch some of Shetland, because I really want to, but I wanted to get at least some of these chapters done before I did that. And I did it. Also, I changed into my cozy comfy because it's cold down here.
Okay, so I haven't listened to your thingy yet because I haven't started reading, because after my shower, I started making dinner, but I will listen to it in a minute. But I have some things to say that I remember just about the series in general, kind of, but not spoilery at all. So the first series is 100% just based on the Greek pantheon, and then the second series delves into crossover between Greek and Roman pantheon, and then there's 2 spin-offs, one that has Egyptian pantheon and one that has Norse pantheon, and those ones I have not read anything of thus far. And also, this series, I mean, it's popular, but I don't understand how it didn't match or overtake the Harry Potter series, because there's just, it's got a lot of the same vibes, but, you know, without the bad parts. Also, I know you're going to be audiobooking this one. I am going to be ebooking this one, because I'm pretty sure I've got at least 3 of the series is on my ebook. Maybe more. I don't know. I haven't checked. It's been a long time.
I was sending Taryn messages just to make sure it was cool that if I included any of her voice notes in this vlog, just because, you know, I want to make sure that she knows it's going to happen before this comes out in over a year. And it devolved into her basically being like, yeah, I'd never be mad at you for doing that. I'm like, I know, but, like, you ask these things. And I was like, I just want to make sure it's cool before I use the footage and that type of thing. She's like, we're always cool. And of course, I had to use a Teen Girl Squad gif, because this is the era in which we grew up.
Hi, so I've read up until the end of chapter 9, which means I'm about almost 40% of the way through, and I see that I have like at least 6 voice notes from Taryn, so let's see how far she got through. Oh no, it's so many.
Also, I request, because I have read this book before, so I do know how it goes, but if you have any, like, suspicions or theories or anything like that, I would love to hear about them, because I'm very curious as to what it's like from a first-timer's perspective. Also, so I've just read, and I'm at chapter 7 right now. I will probably read a little bit more before I sleep, but yes to everything that you said in your thing, and also, yeah, I really don't understand how these books, again, they're popular, but they never took off to the same level as the Harry Potter books, and yet I'm reading them and I'm like, oh yeah, this is similar, and this is similar, and they're like the Harry Potter books, but better in a lot of ways. I guess when these came out, the world hadn't realized that J.K. Rowling was a horrible person, so that probably had something to do with it. But you'd think they would have, like, taken off more after. I don't know. But yes. Also, as to your comment about being mad that Dionysus is a dirtbag, in this book, he's also the god of madness, if I remember right. So that's kind of interesting. I don't remember if that's a thing in the books, but from my many delvings into Greek history, I remember that that's one of his things as well. And also, I don't know if he is, maybe he's a god of a kind of theater. I know that Apollo is also a god of theater. Maybe there's multiple gods of theater, but I know Apollo definitely has a hand in theater as well. Actually, I think I'm wrong. Apollo was a god of a million different things, and I think theater kind of tangentially, but not theater like Dionysus was theater. Apollo's got music and poetry under his purview. Okay, I'm in the middle of reading chapter 8, and I know it's a great book and everything like that, but, like, why we gotta keep with the whole theme of mean people are ugly? Like, why that gotta be a thing? And I mean, I guess I've read plenty of things in my lifetime where mean people are pretty too, so there's that, but, like, I don't know, when you refer to someone and their piggy face, just, I don't know, perhaps we can explain things differently? The last sentence of chapter 8 is just so perfect. No notes. Okay, so I'm halfway through chapter 10, and I'm stopping.
I can't remember what the last line of chapter 8 was, because, like, why would I remember exact lines? But now I kind of want to go back and see what it was. Also, she was about halfway through chapter 10 when she fell asleep last night, and I have no updates after that, so I'm gonna let her know where I am, and yeah, we'll go from there.
Hi. So, yeah, I completely agree about the whole, like, oh, this person is pig-faced, or this person is whatever. Like, every time he's talking about a bully that he doesn't like the face of, especially girl bullies, which seems to be a thing. Like, it seems like, in one way, it's like, oh, yeah, girls can be strong, too, but also, like, the girls that are strong are also, like, pig-faced, or that Nancy girl from the beginning of the book that he didn't like, and they're never, like... I mean, it makes sense. If you really don't like somebody, you're not going to talk about their best qualities, but also I hate it too. I just got to the end of the 9th chapter, and I can't remember what the end of the 8th chapter was. You were like, yes, that's a perfect line, no notes. And I'm like, I don't remember exact lines, and I don't really want to rewind the audiobook. But as for, like, me trying to be like, oh, here are my hints or whatever, I think it was pretty obvious from the beginning who his dad was, but also it's middle grade, so I expected it to be obvious because, like, kids gotta pick up on these things, so that makes sense. As for, like, the Oracle thing and trying to figure out, like, how that's gonna go down, I think that what it's going to be, because it's like you're gonna fail the thing that is most important, I think he's not. I think that's what that's going to be, but he is going to be able to, like, do what he's meant to do with finding the lightning bolt and all that type of stuff. As for, like, who turns their back on him, I don't know, because really he only has, like, 2 friends, especially that are going to be on this journey with him, so I'm like, oh no, I don't know what it's going to be, and if it's going to be a big betrayal or, like, a teeny tiny baby betrayal, which technically counts, but, like, doesn't really mess things up. I don't know yet, so it'll be fun to find out.
And on we go to chapter 10. I'm into chapter 11, and they've just met a character named Auntie M, who is completely veiled and has a bunch of, you know, garden gnomes and other seemingly concrete structures around the place, and I'm just like, this is Medusa, isn't it? I just finished at the end of the 15th chapter, which is, they're in, like, this abandoned water park situation. They have to go get Ares' shield, and, yeah, that was an adventure. Let's see what Taryn's up to, though, because she sent me some voice messages.
I am at chapter 16 right now, and...
Never mind. I just had a shower, don't judge me, but I think I know who's going to betray him. I'm pretty sure I know, so I'm gonna make my guess to Taryn right now. I don't know if I want to tell you this, though, because, like, spoilers for this 20-year-old book. Hey, so I'm partway through chapter 19, and I think the person that's gonna betray him was... We'll see how that goes. So I just finished the book. Overall, very much enjoyed it. I was right about who betrayed him, so that's nice. That feels good to me. I have a bunch of messages from Taryn, so let's listen to those, and then I will tell her that I'm done and all that good stuff.
I am at chapter 16 right now, and I'm going to finish this chapter, and then I'm going to say things. The downside to rereading a book and a series that you've already read a bunch of before, Once Upon a Time, is that my brain just keeps connecting all the stuff in this one to, like, future things. And I'm like, do these future things actually happen? I think they do, but it's been so long. So since I have an ebook and not a audiobook, I can go backwards easier than you. The last sentence in chapter 8 was, Poseidon said, Chiron, Earthshaker, Stormbringer, father of horses, hail, Perseus Jackson, son of the sea god. Okay, this is going to be in reference to chapters 16? Yes, 16. The Lotus Casino that they were stuck in for a while is kind of cool. And also a thing that comes up in a future book, kind of tangentially. They refer to it, but it's kind of cool. I'm like, oh yeah, right, that was a thing. It happened. So I was looking through Rick Riordan's Wikipedia, and basically there's like 25 books, and they're all interconnected, but the first original series has only 5 books.
So yeah, that makes sense. Also, I noticed that this is the first book in like 3 different series, so I imagine it's the first book. I don't know what the structure's like, but I'm sure it makes sense in some way. So yeah, let's tell Taryn I'm done. Hello, I finished the book, and yeah, I was right. It was good times. I enjoyed it. I think it's going to be kind of fun to come back every summer, that type of thing. And it makes sense that he's starting this summer camp at around 12, because, you know, that makes sense, especially if there's 5 books. So yeah, I liked it. I'm sure I had other thoughts. There were other things that I was like, oh, that little bit is really cool, or this little turn of phrase is great, but can I remember them now? Obviously, no. No, I cannot. That would just be too easy.
So the biggest question is, do you want to read more of them?
I'm so bad at continuing series, and also I have so many other books I need to read, but like, maybe? Hi, I come to you from the car because I needed to get some lunch, which was absolutely delicious. It's from this vegan food cart that I always go to when I'm back here in the Comox Valley. And then I decided that I was going to go and sit in my car and read, so I finished the graphic novel I was working on, and now obviously I'm picking up a book from my 40 Before 40 TBR, which is this one, The Hours. I have no idea what this is about, to be quite honest, and also I really apologize if you can hear some like unhinged flute playing in the background. Somebody in this park is just making the worst sounds on either a flute and or harmonica, and I don't know why they've decided everyone needs a migraine, but they have. All I know about this is it won the Pulitzer Prize. I'm not gonna know anything going into it. It is fairly short, which is nice, so I'm just gonna start reading it for as long as I can deal with the sounds outside this car. Alright, I'm almost through the first full chapter, but I just had to stop because this is a little bit silly. So in the prologue, we see the self-induced death of Virginia Woolf in 1941, and then we skip forward to the end of the 20th century, it doesn't say an exact year, to a character who is nicknamed Mrs. Dalloway, but is not the one from literature, which I don't know that character anyway, and she is going to get flowers because she's hosting an event because her friend is getting a literary award, and she's telling the florist about it, and it's like, we're having a little party tonight for a friend who's just won this big deal literary award. The Pulitzer? And I'm like, this book won the Pulitzer, didn't it? And I flip back, I'm like, yes, it did. So far what I can tell you is this book is incredibly long-winded, and the narration goes off on all these tangents. Like, every sentence has semicolons in it, and it just goes, and sometimes brackets, and it just goes off on tangents about things that I don't know if I should care about them, to such a point where I get confused, because I thought that the person that she's having the dinner for, who is getting this award, was her husband, or at least her lover, but it turns out that she has a female lover, and he's had male lovers, and I think his T cells are low, which is a coded way of saying that he's HIV positive, and just all of these things that I'm just like, could we not have written this more clearly? Why is it it's the most complicated writing that you can't really understand what the heck is going on that gets big prizes? Anyway, I've got like a page and a half to finish this chapter, and thankfully that terrible music stopped playing. I don't know who was playing what type of instrument. There were a couple of different types of instruments, but they stopped. So after that, I'm gonna go get some chocolate to wake myself up because I have a board meeting after this. Okay, I just got to the next chapter, and again it's from Miss Wolf's perspective, which we didn't know was her perspective in the prologue until it actually said her last name, and then later it said her first name, so if you had ever heard of her, you would have put it together, basically. But I think this is kind of going to be a conversation between the Mrs. Dalloway in the end of the 20th century, because this book was published in 1998, and Virginia Woolf, because Mrs. Dalloway is a character from a Virginia Woolf novel, I want to say. Yeah, looking at the copyright page, Mrs. Dalloway is literally a book by Virginia Woolf, so I guess that makes sense. Hopefully I can enjoy this without having read that, but based on the sentence structure alone, I'm highly doubting that. So I won't say that I'm falling in love with this, but I am warming to it. We definitely have at least one more perspective, and that's Mrs. Brown, and she is somebody who is reading some of Virginia Woolf's works in the 50s, I want to say. I've read another chapter since we met her, so I'm trying to remember, and I don't remember. This is interesting because I feel like it's falling in and out of timelines, which is actually interesting to me as opposed to the ridiculous writing that I described before. And it's also interesting to me because I literally just finished listening to The Surviving Sky, which is a book that's definitely all about different timelines. So based on that, I'm enjoying this a little bit more, especially because Mrs. Dalloway, that character, just went to go visit her friend Richard, which is the one who is getting the award, and he seems to be falling in and out of timelines a little bit because he's like, has the award already happened? No, not yet. Also, we're middle-aged right now, although they're like in their 50s, which is that middle-aged? Because I hope it's middle-aged. That means I haven't reached middle-age yet. But anyway, he has this feeling of like, we're middle-aged, but also we're young lovers standing next to a pond, because at some point they were lovers. I was not wrong about that, despite the writing making me feel like I was. So, yeah, I don't feel like I am completely on board, but I'm warming to it. Also, when I was logging this online as a thing that I was currently reading, I happened to see the movie poster version of the book, and Meryl Streep is definitely in it. Now, firstly, if Meryl Streep's in something, I'm interested. Secondly, she was actually name-dropped in the first chapter of this book, so when I saw that, I was like, wait, what? That's two different weird name drops in the first chapter, because the Pulitzer Prize, Meryl Streep, like, what is going on with this book? What timeline am I in? Well, that certainly was a thing I finished. I didn't expect the three stories to kind of come together in the way that they did, and they didn't really come together until the very last chapter, although there were a couple of hints I guess I could have noticed, but I really didn't. All in all, not the worst thing I've ever read, and I feel like I would have gotten more out of it if I were more familiar with Virginia Woolf's work, but I'm not, and that's okay. Hello! I feel very behind on this project considering I am rocketing towards the end of this journey and I'm in the low 20s of the books I've read from this list. I'm sure I just edited the number into the last clip, so you know how far I am. I don't know how far I am, I'm not gonna look it up. But during this month of July, I have put aside some reading time specifically to try to catch up on some of the books, especially the ones that I have physical copies of, and possibly also some of my audiobook copies. I think I might have some audiobook holds coming in that will cover some things. And the first one I'm going to start with is The Only Good Indians. I've been meaning to read this for ages. I think I actually also bought it as a digital copy as well as this copy before realizing I had overlapped that, which is awkward, but whatever, it's fine. This of course also serves as a reminder that I read the first book in his trilogy and then haven't read the other books, so I do need to do that as well, but those don't count for my 40 before 40 TBR, so this takes precedence.
I'm just about to start now, and I am excited. Hi, so being in the woods right now is probably not the best idea considering The Only Good Indians has to do with the ghost of an elk literally murdering people that murdered her 10 years previously, but I finally read the chapter this morning where it lays out exactly what happened 10 years ago to give you kind of context, which is cool. I'm mostly stopping right now because I'm listening to audiobooks as I walk, and I just finished the audiobook I was listening to, and now I'm going on to one that is for this project, so I need to tell you about it. I'm about to hit play on Perks of Being a Wallflower. This one was suggested by my friend Zoe, and I'm excited to finally get around to it. I just walked an hour and a half to go to a cafe I really like because they have apple cake that is really, really good, but I'm not going to eat it until I get home, which means I'm going to sit here with my beverage and my book for a while, and then I will eventually get apple cake. I'll give you updates when it's less loud, though. Okay, I'm home and showered. On the way home, I finished Perks of Being a Wallflower, and I really wanted to cry, but I was in public, so I only sort of cried, but it probably just looked like I was sweating because I was sweating. It's summer, it's hot. That was such a good book. I did not expect to love it as much as I did. It's about this kid who's going through a really hard time and all of the things that are happening with his friends, and he's writing these letters to this person who doesn't know he's writing the letters to. It's so fresh in my mind I cannot be articulate about it, but I loved it. Also, I only read one chapter of The Only Good Indians only because I wanted to start my walk back from the cafe. And I'm kind of into the second part of it because at the very beginning you get one person's perspective, it's kind of an epilogue type of thing, and then you get a second person's perspective. And I expected that perspective to last through the rest of the book, and boy howdy does it not. It definitely got to a point where it's like, wow, you can't turn back from here. And then it somehow got even worse. So I'm excited to see how it continues. And I've done it. It's done. I finished it. It's equal parts anticipation, basketball, and like moments that are suddenly so gory that you didn't see them coming even though you should have seen them coming because there's so much anticipation. I did really enjoy it. It was just like a weird mixture of those things. I might start right now, I might start tomorrow, but my next book for this list is The Midnight Library, which should be kind of fun to read because all I know about it accidentally is that there's time travel involved, and I'm currently listening to Sea of Tranquility, which also has time travel, so it's just weird timing for me. One shower, one dinosaur movie, and several chapters later, and I am really enjoying this. I thought I was going to start tomorrow. I did not start tomorrow, and then I couldn't stop reading. It's so compelling at the beginning, especially because you're kind of given a little bit of a countdown. Definitely look up trigger warnings for this one ahead of time. That is a thing that you need to do because this is definitely about somebody deciding to no longer be here. But it's also super compelling, and I am looking forward to how she spends her time in this library. Hi, I'm here today to read at the Frogmore Pub, which is one of my favorite places to read. Also, it's not a real pub, it is a pub in the backyard of a family member, and it's adorable. And I'm gonna go drink some cider and continue reading this, which I'm really enjoying. I'm about halfway through, and her mental health might be turning soon, but it's kind of hard to tell. Look how cute this place is. I love having this place to myself. I just crack the door open so people know I'm in here if they want to come hang out. I brought my own cider, even though there's booze in here. I always feel bad, like, taking it. Without permission, obviously. Honestly, if I asked, they'd give it to me. And this is actually where I spent my evening last night, because it was Wednesday and I had to be having my Wednesday tradition, and now it's Thursday. I've got a board meeting later, so I can't drink too much, but I'm gonna have a cider or two. Oh, I should also mention that not only did I read this book while I was waiting for my lunch, which was delicious, I'll put a photo here, but when I went to buy that cider, I got ID'd. I'm almost 40. That's delightful. It might have something to do with the fact that I am wearing a cartoon shirt, but like, let's just forget that. Hi, I finished this last night but didn't feel emotionally available to actually talk about it, plus I was very sleepy and needed to go to bed. This was fantastic. You live so many lives with this character, all of these different lives that could have happened if slight things didn't happen in her life up until when she goes to the Midnight Library, and it's just fantastic. It's absolutely so interesting as a thought experiment to be like, what would my life be like if this had happened instead of this thing that literally happened in my life? And I really enjoyed it. I don't really know what else to tell you about it. The next two books that I'm reading, both my physical book and my audiobook, are not on this list, so there will be a slight time gap to the next one, but hopefully not too long, because as you know, I still have a lot of things to go on this list.
Hi, I started another book in this series today, so I should probably tell you about it. That's called Dark Archive, the subtitle of which is A Librarian's Investigation into the Science and History of Books Bound in Human Skin. I myself have seen at least one book bound in human skin, although now that I've read the opening to this, I'm wondering, was it actually human skin? Because although there definitely have been books bound in human skin, some of them that have been reported to be bound in human skin haven't been, and there's even a test for that, which is what I'm learning in the opening of this book. Although I have a feeling that I'm going to learn in this book that that one was in fact bound in human skin, because it's a pretty famous example, so I can't imagine that they wouldn't have tested it by now. In any case, even though I started reading this earlier today, I didn't talk to you until now, nighttime, because I was out in public and I didn't want to talk to a camera in this very beautiful little garden where there were butterflies and stuff, and we were having a lovely meal. Then we went out to the Coombs Country Fair, which was also delightful, so I haven't actually read that much, but I'm enjoying it so far. Hi, I normally wouldn't update you this late in the night, but like I have to because I've been reading this, really enjoying it by the way. The narrative nonfiction style of this writing is just really gripping and interesting, and I'm learning so much about anthropodermic bibliophagy, but I got really excited and had to update you because I'm a little bit more than halfway through this book, and I'm finally getting to the point where this author is going to talk about the person whose book skin I think I saw, and maybe I'll find out if it was in fact a human skin book. The human in question was William Burke. He and William Hare murdered a bunch of people so they could sell their dead bodies to science, and I used to be a tour guide in Edinburgh, which is where this happened, and there's a little police museum on the Royal Mile that has this little book that is bound in human skin, or at least that's what I was told when I was learning how to be a tour guide there, and then also when I went to go see it, and I could actually see like little hair follicles when I looked at it, so I was like, you got me, I think that's a human skin book. And now I can actually read this chapter, and if they did their testing, which they didn't do any testing on the ones in England, so I'm not sure if they did testings on the ones in Scotland, I can maybe find out if it was true or if it's just still alleged. But it's also my bedtime, so I might brush my teeth and go read this in bed and update you at a later time whether or not this has been verified. Hi, I finished Dark Archives a couple of days ago, but forgot to film an outro, knowing that I would eventually have to film my weekly wrap-up for the week anyway. So I just did that, and I might as well do this because the camera's already set up, and I don't have to hold it. I didn't get an answer one way or the other on the book that I personally saw while I was living in Edinburgh, and I'm kind of okay with that, only because I don't want it to have ended up being not a human skin book that I saw this one time, because that was kind of a cool experience I had. At the time of publication of this book, they hadn't tested those books, however, I could probably go on their website and see if they've tested them and if those results are public or not. But I don't think I'm going to. This had some very interesting history in it, down to a guy that actually decided he wanted his human skin to bind his own life story, which is just kind of badass if you ask me. So if you are at all interested in this subject, I would definitely pick up this book. Hi, it's my face again. I started reading this last night, but I was in bed, so I wasn't going to pull out my camera to tell you about it. This is Hamnet. I've been meaning to read this for ages. I think that's a very big theme within all of the books in this vlog, obviously. So if you don't know anything about this book, basically you need to know that Shakespeare was a dude. He had a son named Hamnet. Hamnet died when he was 11, and 4 years later he wrote Hamlet. Like, that's the context you need to go into this book with, and that's the context I pretty much had going into this book. I've only read the first chapter so far. We've definitely met the titular character. He is currently still alive, but his twin sister definitely has the bubonic plague, and I have a feeling that he's going to catch it from her, she's going to survive, and there's going to be grief there. I don't expect this to be a happy book, but also I'm excited to see how all of these characters interact with each other, because in this first chapter we get a big sense of what Stratford looks like, and we get a big sense of all of these different types of characters, a lot of them living very, very close to each other or in the same quarters as each other, and then kind of the outside of that as well. So I'm excited to see how it goes. I'm expecting to be sad at various points. So I'm 124 pages in, and this has a dual timeline, so in addition to the timeline I already talked about, we also have a timeline that's like maybe 20 years previous, a little bit less than that, where it's the Latin tutor and Agnes meeting and then deciding they want to be together, and then we know they eventually get together because we know they have kids, because they are in fact the parents of Hamnet and Judith and Susanna. And I don't really understand if we know that these are basically stand-ins for Will and Anne, why were they calling them something different, but we are. Also earlier I said the bubonic plague. I don't know if that was the plague that actually is happening when the
this book happens. It says the Black Death on the back. I don't know if that's the same thing. I'm not up on my plague lore. The thing about this book so far is I'm enjoying it, but also it really loves lists, specifically lists as a run-on sentence. There was one particular part where it started with something to the effect of the rows and rows of apples were rocking, and another word for rocking and another word for rocking in their shelves. And that to me was enough to be like, yeah, so people are humping against these shelves. And yeah, I was right, but until we actually got to that point, there was like a page of what this kestrel was hearing, which was basically just humping sounds. And I'm just like, why is this book written this way? It's not as though I'm not enjoying myself as much as one can, knowing that like kids are gonna die in this book. But as soon as I realized this actually has this little like I want a prize sticker on the front, I was like, ooh, I'm in for an interesting time, because usually when they have a sticker like that, specifically, what was it, the Woman's Prize for Fiction, I'm like, oh, I tend to think these are overwritten and overrated, so that's a thing. Like I said, enjoying it as much as one can, considering the subject matter, but wishing there were a lot less lists in it. Hi, it must be a Wednesday because I'm in my bathtub and I just finished Hamnet. This is beautifully written, but like I said, she really loves a list, and that's a type of style that gets really repetitive to me personally after a while. It is beautifully written. There was in fact the death of a child, like we knew there was going to be, and there was a note at the end that kind of explains a little bit about why she called the character that I would have assumed you would call Anne Agnes, because in her father's will she was in fact called Agnes. The surname of Hathaway never came up, which was a little bit confusing, and then of course we don't actually know her husband's name, but we all know what it is. Enjoyable. It was kind of enjoyable to see these characters go to these places that I've imagined myself, because I've studied enough Shakespeare to be like, this is what I assume going to a Shakespeare show would be like. In that time frame, obviously, I've seen Shakespeare in the modern age. So yeah, enjoyable enough. Another one checked off my list. Hi, I'm reading another book on the list. This one is an interesting choice, and the reason I put it on my 40 before 40 TBR is the fact that this is the oldest known writing of somebody who is intersex, to my knowledge. And this is really weird. I did start it over the last couple of days, and I've been picking away at it, and there was an introduction bit kind of talking about people who were intersex, and obviously it was called something different back then, and I'm not going to use that name unless I'm reading the title or whatever. But anyway, sometimes they would be socialized one way, and then when they turned 18 they could decide whether or not they wanted to become the other gender. Only two genders, that whole thing. But you couldn't flip-flop through life, so you really had to like choose one or the other at that point. And that's not always the case, and from my understanding what happened with this actual real life person who went by several different names, so it's really hard to figure out how to talk about them. They were kind of found out, I guess, when they get to the age of 18 and forced to become male even though they'd been socialized as female, and I haven't quite got to that part. The weird thing about this is because they were part of medical textbooks to do with their case, for some reason somebody had their diary, so what's in here is written kind of as a diary, but it reads as though it's a memoir, but it didn't know it was going to be a memoir, because I don't think they were like, hey, I want people to publish this after I take myself out of the situation, which I know happens at the end of this. So I don't really know how to feel about this. This person also lived in the 1880s, I want to say, is when this was written, maybe the 1890s, so a lot of the verbiage, especially because it's translated, is like difficult to get through, and because I don't think it was meant to be something that other people read, it is kind of a challenge at times. This also at the end includes, I believe it's a short story that was written based on the life of this person, and I'm going to read that as well, probably. But I don't know how I feel about any of this. Besides, I want to read from the viewpoint of somebody who's intersex, even though I don't think they knew that people were going to be reading their diary. Conflicted feelings, but wanted to update you that I did start this probably a couple of days ago, and I've been picking my way through it. Hello, to prove I sometimes do get out of the house and take my book with me, I'm talking to you from the bottom basement hallway of the continuing study building at UVic. Why am I doing that? Because I have a class tonight, so I'm going to that. It's called The Art of Murder. It's about murder mysteries. It's fun. I was reading this in the campus pub, and give me a second, I'll show you a piece of history. When I decided I was going to take some classes at continuing education at UVic, I thought it was funny that I actually dug up my old student ID from when I went here 20 years ago. I went here so long ago that you could put a phone number on the front and it didn't need the area code. And don't try to look this up by student number or whatever, because the student number system has changed since the system, so it's useless to you. But I basically have the same hairstyle, which is weird because it's definitely changed over the years. In any case, I was reading this in the same campus bar where I used to play a lot of Texas Hold'em poker 20 years ago, and I've gotten to page 93, 94. So when I was talking about this before, I think I was just uninformed. I think that this person legitimately wanted to transition to male, or at least that's what they thought they wanted. This book is written in such a way where sometimes they will say something, and I'm using they not to gender them, but they just to be neutral, because I honestly don't know what they would prefer at this point. There'd be this whole page of stuff that I didn't really understand, and then suddenly they'd be like, oh yeah, and now we're lovers. And I'm like, when did that happen? I don't understand what's going on. And then they were like, oh, I've decided that I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to see if I can transition to socially for a reason and not talk to my partner about it. And I was just like, are you doing it for your partner so you could maybe get married because they are in a relationship with a woman at this point and it's secretive, obviously, because they were both identified as female at birth? Or are you just wanting to do that in general? Like, I don't really understand this book a lot besides like the things I can pick out of it, but on a sentence by sentence basis, I'm just like, I don't know what's going on half the time, let's be honest. So that's where I am with it. I am about just a little over halfway through the text of this. There is that short story at the end that I talked about, and then there's also some articles and some appendices that I may or may not read. I'll decide when I get to them. So I finished this, and I still don't really know how to feel about it. Firstly, last night before I went to bed, I finished the portion that's actually the memoirs, and it kind of cuts off abruptly, and then we find out that that's basically all that was left from the person who had the memoirs. And if I read the medical section that's after that correctly, and I could be wrong, so take this with a grain of salt, it's just my understanding, the doctor that attended this person's body after they died read the note of their intentions to die and went, well, there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with this person's life, like they talked to people around them. I wonder if maybe they have an STD, so let's check the genitals and see if that's why they decided to end things. And then upon checking the genitals, realized that the genitals were different than the binary system that people are used to. And from there, somehow got permission to take this body and do what they needed to do with it for science. And I still don't know how to feel about that because it's not like consent was given. So this is an interesting piece of medical history, but at the same time, I don't really know if what was written was actually what happened in this person's life, because throughout the memoirs, this person was calling themselves Camille, and Camille was not a name they ever went by. So I don't know if it was memoirs, but of this Camille character that was kind of loosely based on their own life. I have no idea. Also, the short story at the end of this, Scandal at the Convent, that is loosely based on this person's life, I didn't bother reading because I just assumed it was going to be sensationalized, and I didn't need that to feel like I had finished this, so I skipped that bit, I'm not gonna lie. Like I said, mixed feelings, but I'm glad I finally got around to this one. Hi, I started the Magpie Murders on Monday and completely forgot to update you about that fact because, to be honest, I forgot it was on this list. This book came up recently while I was taking a class called The Art of Murder 101 of Mystery Writing, and I thought I had just taken it out of the library for that reason, and then I remembered it's also on this list, so here we are. I'm about 20% of the way through, and I'm really enjoying the fact that this is one of those books where there are so many characters, and we're constantly hopping around and seeing what's going on with them. And there was this opening from before we started, from this woman who is supposed to be editing the book that we are now reading, and somehow we find out that it changed her life completely, and that's just fun and interesting to me. So far there's one death that seems like it was just an accident, and now a few days later somebody else has died in the same house, and there are many people that
would like to see that person no longer be alive, and we've seen a lot of their perspectives. So I'm very intrigued. I'm also very intrigued by our detective character, who is half Greek, half German, was living in Germany but now lives in the UK and is this detective character. And we find out that he has just been to the doctor, and the doctor's like, you probably have a few months to live. We also know from that editor perspective from the very beginning that this is somewhere in the series of books for this detective, so I'm wondering if this is meant to be the last book. I don't know, but I'm thoroughly intrigued with what's going on with this whole village of people. Hi, I finished The Magpie Murders. I'm really sorry I haven't been updating you, but I was mostly listening to it in the car while I was going 3 hours up island and then 3 hours back, and I wasn't going to pull over to update you. Firstly, the drive up island was super raining, so like I wasn't pulling over for anything. I was just focused on both the road and the book. But there was definitely a section that was like 83% of the way through the book where it really started talking about structuring a murder mystery, and it was just so interesting to me, especially because I apparently read this at the perfect time for me personally, because I literally just took a class called The Art of Murder, so we were just going over how things are structured and different tropes and things like that, so this was the perfect book to read around this time frame for me, so I love that. I don't know if I updated you about this or not, but about the first half or so of this is the novel of somebody, and then after that we are actually trying to figure out what's happening in the real life of the book, and then also figure out what happened in the rest of the novel, because the last couple of chapters are missing. And it turns out this author likes to write people he knows into his books, so you're really trying to figure out what happened, and I really enjoyed all of it. I'm so stoked that I've got another book off this list because we are getting closer and closer to my deadline. Hi, yesterday I finally started The Confessions of Franny Langdon. I should have read this last week for the Queer Light Readathon. I actually put it on my TBR for the readathon, but as I was going through my books I realized that if I just read the other 8 books on my TBR, they covered all of the challenges that this one would actually cover, so I was like, okay, because I want to actually black out the bingo board because I'm extra, I'll read those first 8 books, and then I guess I'll read this one this week. I actually started this last night. I got about 80 pages in, and I was reading it at a silent reading club hosted in a greenhouse in this really interesting building, because clearly it used to be a house and it's been converted into a coffee shop and a bookstore and a gardening center, and it was raining a lot, so it was just very atmospheric and beautiful, and it was a great place to read and start this book. So far I'm interested, but I'm also thought this was much more of a like whodunit type of situation, because our main character we know is on trial for murder of the people that she serves, because she started her life in Jamaica and was a slave there, and then eventually now she's in England, and we basically did a I guess you're wondering how I got here, and we went back to her early life, and I wasn't expecting that at all. So now I'm in her early life trying to figure out how she's going to come into the possession of these people that eventually she may or may not end up having been the person that killed them. We don't know. She says she doesn't think she did, but is it just gonna turn out that she did? I'm not entirely certain. This apparently has also been adapted, so maybe I'll watch the adaptation at some point, but I am very behind on this project, so obviously I've got to read this before I even think about watching any adaptations. Hi, before I completely forget to do so, in the holiday chaos, I finished this, so I should probably tell you about it. This was much more literary than I expected. I did end up enjoying it, however, I was kind of more in for the murder mystery, and we did kind of get that, but we also had to do a lot of going back in time, which was actually okay, but this also had some twists that I was like, oh, this is a whole other side tangent that I didn't see coming, so I liked it. It wasn't exactly what I was expecting, but that's on me, honestly. Hello! We're in the final year of this project, only months away from the deadline, and I still have 9 books to read. So, from the library I now have A Lush and Seething Hell. The thing I didn't notice about this book when it was put on this list by, I think, somebody on Reddit, is that it's 2 tales of cosmic horror, so I don't know if these tales are interconnected. I don't know if I'm basically just getting 2 novellas in one book. I have no idea. I just know it's cosmic horror. I like horror. Let's get into it. Hello, I've been in this bathtub way too long, but I wanted to finish the first novella in A Lush and Seething Hell, which is called The Sea Dreams It Is the Sky. Now, it might be the fact that I've had 3/4 of this bottle, or it might be the fact that this is just a very confusing novella, but I
have questions. So this novel is about a woman named Isabel who lives in Spain in 1989, but she's originally from a very small country that doesn't actually exist in South America. And one day this guy comes up to her and is like, hey, you're from my small country, and he tries to figure out exactly where she's from, and she's like, no, you're wrong, or whatever, but like they are from the same country that doesn't actually exist, to be clear. And they become friends of a sort, so he starts taking her out every week and he pays for everything, but she eventually finds out that he's this famous poet that like Argentina really hates, and he only has one eye, so people call him the Eye because the other eye has an eye patch. And eventually there is this friendship and they go to the cinema, and he laughs at really weird things at the cinema, but like they are friends, weirdly enough. And then one day he's like, I have to go back to our home country. I'm gonna leave you my apartment. I've already paid the rent. Also, here's a bunch of money. Just, you know, if you feel like organizing my stuff, go for it. But other than that, you have no responsibility. And from there, she reads this journal that he wrote when he was being tortured, which is a precursor to the reason why he only has the one eye. And then from there, she ends up going on this very long journey to go back to where she is from, because there's cryptic messages about whether or not she should go save people. I usually hate feeling like I don't understand things, and I'm a little bit of that mind right now, but also I'm like, I'm sure I just missed something, because wine? Maybe? I don't know. I was having this wine during the latter half of what I was reading, so who knows? But also now I'm wondering what the definition actually is of cosmic horror, because there are a lot of things in this that are just like, maybe they're precursors to other things you know about because of the things you read or the stories he told. I don't know. But also there's this big adventure element to it where she goes across the world to try to save this guy, and whether or not that's gonna happen, and then hand waving as to the epilogue as to like the ruler of this place maybe getting what he deserves. I don't know. I don't want to tell you what happened in this novella, but I do want to tell you it is thought-provoking. I do also want to tell you there were a couple of instances of dudes writing women where I was like, why? Neither of them were like super egregious, but they were enough that I was reminded that this is a dude writing a woman, which happens. But I was very happy to find out that our main character is queer, so that was nice. Anyway, I found out that this is a book of 2 novellas, and the second one is much longer, so I will come back to you after I've read that one. That one is called My Heart Struck Sorrow.
Hi, sorry, there's a heater in the background. I can't turn that off, but I did finish the second novella in A Lush and Seething Hell. This one was much longer. It was about this guy. It's kind of 2 timelines, and both the guys kind of have the same job. They work for the Library of Congress, specifically cataloging music. And the first guy we meet just had a terrible thing happen in his life that was a little bit his fault, and also he feels extra guilty about, because the terrible thing is his wife and child have passed away. And it turns out he was having an affair at the time, so he's not having a great time. He goes back to work about a month later, and then he gets this case where he needs to go to this different place and archive these different things for this person who has recently passed. While doing that, he gets all of these discs from the 1930s and this field journal about this guy who basically went around to these different places trying to get secular music around the United States. And this guy definitely had some things going on because his mother, many years previously, had been murdered, and then also he was in the war, so he's definitely killed people as well. And then he gets obsessed with this very specific song, and then it's just going back and forth between this field journal and what this guy is thinking about what's going on in the field journal, and also his guilt about his entire life. It's definitely one of those tales where you get this like seething, like everything is wrong in the world type of feeling, and there's little bits of like magic-y type things. I actually had to look up the definition for cosmic horror because I didn't know it off the top of my head. I just assumed it had, you know, maybe something to do with the cosmos. That's as far as my brain went. And let's look it up again because I'm right here and I can. It's a subgenre focusing on the fear of the unknown and the insignificance of humanity in an indifferent, vast universe. So yeah, that makes sense. I enjoyed this. There was a little bit of like dude writing where I was like, do we really have to talk about people's genitals for reasons that don't really have anything to do with the plot? Maybe that's a me thing. But this means that I have 8 books left. So I'm glad that I'm picking up at least one of them from the library today. Hi, I'm in a different location and I started one of the books for this project. This is really good. Where I am is Ucluelet, which is a wonderful place on the west coast of Vancouver Island, and I want to show you some footage of it, so I will do that now. Tooth and Claw is about dragons, specifically a whole dragon society. They have their own social hierarchy, they have different rituals around death. It's really, really good so far, but I'll talk to you more about it when I'm home. Hi, I'm home. I've been home for a few days and I finally finished Tooth and Claw. This book is absolutely delightful, and with the world building in this, you can see why it won a World Fantasy Award, as it says on the cover. Essentially in this world we have dragons who are of different sizes based on how much dragon meat they've eaten and how old they are. Dragons also live a really, really long time, although female dragons often die first because sometimes they have problems with their clutches, aka their version of childbirth. There's different hierarchies when it comes to social things as well as religion, and the courts are very different, and this was just fantastic. We're primarily following a certain family and the different people in that family and whether or not they're married, who they're married to, what their titles are, whether or not they have jobs, where they live and how that affects where they live, and the two youngest sisters are unmarried and hoping that one of the two of them will get married and then the other one will just go and live with her sister. However, does it happen that way? Not quite. This was absolutely delightful and I highly recommend it. While we're here, I might as well also tell you that the library gave me my copy of Red Shirts, so I will be starting to read that probably tonight, maybe tomorrow. This one, all I really know about it is it's kind of like Star Trek, and you know how on Star Trek if you have a red shirt you're probably gonna be the person that dies in the scene? Yeah, it's like that, except for the back says they were expendable until they started comparing notes. That's all I know about this. I was told to read this at least a decade ago by a friend of mine, and now I'm finally getting around to it. Hi, I finished Red Shirts and I heckin' loved it. This was really, really fun. All I knew going into this is the Red Shirts kind of were figuring out that the whole red shirt situation of it all, and this went to some really fun places because not only did it talk about really bad writing in sci-fi shows, it then talked about certain things that were also self-referential. This was also really interesting because in order to solve problems they had to use bad sci-fi writing to do it, which was just really, really fun. This book is also split up into a couple of different sections. One is the majority of the narrative, but at the end there are 3 separate codas. One is in first person, one is in second person, and one is in third person. And it would have been fine to just have the novel be the first part of it, but these 3 codas at the end actually bring so much to the story, and I just really enjoyed that. If you're a fan of sci-fi and you like things that are kind of meta and self-referential and referencing the genre that they're in and those types of things, you would really enjoy this. As for the rest of this project, I own 3 of the books that I need to read, and then I think the other 3 are coming from the library eventually, so I will get to one of them soon, hopefully, because time's a-tickin'. Hi, I've picked up another library book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which when I put it on this list I had no idea it was over 400 pages, and I don't know anything about it, or I didn't know anything about it going into it because I've finished 3 chapters. So initially I was like, oh no, who put this on my list? I hope I enjoy it, and so far I'm very much enjoying it. This is pretty much a philosophy book is how I would describe it first off, but then in almost equal parts it's also an adventure story, because as we start this off, our author is on a motorcycle trip with a couple of his friends and his 11-year-old son, and he talks about this time where he realized that he and his friend John actually have this one specific conflict, which is that he thinks that people should know how to do maintenance on their own motorcycles, and John is one of those types of people that's like, no, that's what mechanics are for. And this book obviously goes more deeply into it than I'm going to be able to sum up right now, especially because I want to get back to reading, but I'm finding this really engaging and really interesting. And one of the other things I didn't know about this book when I put it on this list is that this is a very big book from the 1970s, and so far I'm really enjoying it. This last chapter had a lot to say about ghosts, and there's one paragraph in particular that I wanted to read to you because I thought it was interesting. Laws of nature are human inventions like ghosts. Laws of logic, of mathematics, are also human inventions like ghosts. The whole blessed thing is a human invention, including the idea that it isn't a human invention. The world has no existence whatsoever outside of human imagination. It's all a ghost, it's all antiquity, and in antiquity it was recognized as a ghost.
the whole blessed world we live in. It's run by ghosts. We see what we see because these ghosts show it to us. Ghosts of Moses and Christ and the Buddha and Plato and Descartes and Rousseau and Jefferson and Lincoln, on and on and on. Isaac Newton is a very good ghost, one of the best. Your common sense is nothing more than the voices of thousands and thousands of these ghosts from the past. Ghosts and more ghosts. Ghosts trying to find their way among the living. So yeah, I picked that quote out because it's a pretty good indication of the type of writing in this book, and I am pleasantly surprised that I'm getting on with this book like I am, especially because we've gotten to the point where I basically need to read one of these books a week in order to get this vlog out on time. Hi, I still have like 70 pages to go in this. I liked the first 100 pages a lot. The next 200 pages or so were quite a slog, and I'm basically going to be really excited to finish this. I've actually been reading this in such a way where I'm like, okay, if you read one more chapter of this, you can read a chapter of a book that's less challenging, and that's been really helpful. However, I'm here to tell you that I'm also about to start another book on this list as my audiobook as I walk to the gym to go lift some barbells, which is brand new to me, so that's fun. I don't really know much about this besides it seems to have a fairly poor rating, so let's find out if I like the Department of Rare Books and Special Collections, because that actually sounds like something that would be up my alley. I love books, but is this book bad? We'll find out. Okay, let's see if we can do this update before the road work outside starts again. I finished Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Mechanic 2 days ago, but I figured I was also going to be talking to you about the other book, so I just decided to do it all in one clip. Basically what I said before about it is how it stands. The last 100 pages or so were interesting, and because I was reading a 25-year anniversary edition, there was a section at the back that actually told you that his son was brutally murdered like 5 years after the book came out, which was like a lot to learn. I ended up enjoying it overall, but a lot of the philosophy stuff definitely went over my head. As for the Department of Rare Books and Special Collections, I ended up enjoying this one. It's basically a mystery because this woman is supposed to be on sabbatical, but her boss actually has a medical emergency, so she ends up having to go back into work and basically cover his job while he's away. And the first thing that she finds out when she finally gets his safe open, because there's manuscripts in there that they're supposed to have for a donor event, is those manuscripts aren't there. But the president of the university won't let her go to the police about it, so she's just like checking all of the stacks for them and trying to just find them because obviously they've been misplaced. Clearly they haven't been stolen. And it's basically a big mystery about who among the stacks might have done this. I have a theory that the reason that people have given this kind of a low rating is the fact that the people within this aren't necessarily all good people. Every single person kind of has something morally wrong with them. Not to a great extent, but to the point where you're like, well, I don't really like this person as a person for what they're doing exactly in this moment, and that probably doesn't let people rate books very highly, is my guess. I overall gave it a 3.5, so that's fair, but it was down at like a 3.2, and I was like, but books, I like bookish books. Why is this so lowly rated? Probably that reason. Oh, yep, there's the construction. I have 4 books left. Gonna get them done. Hi, the dishwasher is running in the background, but I keep forgetting to actually tell you that I've started another book, so we're just doing it, and I'm so sorry if you can hear that. The only way I could find Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep from my library is in this 4-book bind-up, so that's what I'm reading, and I'm only letting you know about this because the pages in here are so incredibly thin. They're like Bible pages, and I just thought that was kind of interesting. It's also one of those books that has like a little ribbon that you can use as a bookmark, so that's what I've been doing. I've started this a couple of nights ago, but it was just before bed, and I've only read 3 chapters, so 2 the first night and then 1 last night. So basically it's about this guy living on Earth in January of 1992, and most people have left Earth for Mars. However, he can't do that because his job keeps him on Earth, and there's a lot of technology and social things about this world that are just incredibly weird and definitely did not come to pass at the time that I was 5 years old. This story is from the 1960s. I don't know exactly which year because it just said 4 stories from the 1960s, so I'd have to actually look up which year this one was published independently. But it is also the basis for the movie Blade Runner, which I have seen, but like don't remember all that much of. There are androids, which there definitely are androids in this one. They're referred to as Andes, but mostly our main character seems really preoccupied with whether or not he owns a real animal or an electric sheep. In this case is what he owns currently, but he'd love to have a real animal, but they're so expensive. And that's basically what I've gotten so far. I will update you when I have more information or more thoughts. Hi, I finished Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep last night, and I enjoyed about the first half of it, and then we really got into some she-boobed-boobly writing, which made no sense. We also got into, like, somebody telling somebody else they loved them, which made no sense, and the overuse of a word that the author coined, which was kipple, which if I ever come across that word in a book again, I'm just gonna irrationally get angry because it was used so often in this book. I got to the end of this and I was basically like, what even is the point? Which might actually be kind of the point of this book a little bit, but also I didn't really end up enjoying this one. That's okay though, it's done now. I only have 3 left. Hi, I'm just about to brush my teeth and crawl into bed, so I figured I might as well also start Seeds in a Dark Fruit Sky. This is actually a book that was compiled by somebody who I met at my very first VidCon, and she was talking about compiling this book when I first met her, and then eventually she actually sent me a copy, and I never got around to reading it because I'm a trash friend, so I'm excited to finally do that. This is an anthology of short stories from Haiti, and I'm looking forward to reading probably the first story before I pass right out. Hi! I finished it. That didn't take me too long. It actually didn't take me too long because although this looks like a pretty hefty short story collection, it's actually written in a bilingual format, so everything on the left-hand side is English and everything on the right-hand side is the same thing, but in Haitian Creole, which I thought was pretty cool. So the story of this is Rosie went on a mission trip to Haiti, talked to a bunch of people, wrote down their stories, wrote those stories in narrative nonfiction, got those stories translated to the language that the people actually speak, had them look over it, make sure she didn't write anything totally out of pocket that they don't agree with, that they didn't actually say, and then eventually got this book published, which I think is kind of cool. These are just quotidian short stories of things that people in Haiti have experienced, and I think it's kind of cool. It's also kind of cool because there's a bunch of people in this that have more than one story, or there's overlapping stories, so clearly people from the same family or the same village are giving their stories, and then sometimes people from one story will show up in another story, which was kind of cool, actually. Definitely an interesting project. I'm glad I finally got around to reading it. And we only have 2 books left, so I'm going to pick up Summer Gone because I think I'm going to enjoy the other book more. Not because I particularly think there's going to be anything wrong with this one. I don't really know anything about this one besides I think it's kind of literary fiction, which sometimes works for me. But I think the other one is more fast-paced, and that's going to get me really excited for the end of the project, which is why I decided to go that way with this. Like I said, I actually don't know anything about this. I think it's a story about a father and a son. I'll get back to you when I know more. Hi, it's either the first day of spring or the last day of summer. Sometimes it switches and I don't understand why, but I have finished Summer Gone. I ended up enjoying this. This is one of those books that's a little bit more sloggy to get to the point than I really tend to care for, but when I look at all the overall quality of this, I really ended up enjoying it. This takes place over a number of years, and we're mostly following one character and then other characters outside of that character's life, but then we also have this one character who's writing in the first person, and you don't really know who that is until the very end, although I had my inklings. I actually just did my review of this book on Pagebound, and I feel like I wrote it really, really well, so I'm just gonna read it to you because I feel like if I try to recreate it just off the cuff like this, it's not gonna go as well as I wrote it down. So here we go. In my mind, this book is best described as a lapping lake. The prose introduces characters, situations, and settings, and then proceeds through a rhythm that switches nearly seamlessly between them all. Just when you learn of a big event, a current sweeps you away, but you always return, sometimes with detail to satisfy, and sometimes those details just out of reach. I was unsurprised to find out in the bio and the back flap of this book that this author has a background in non-fiction, as there were several points throughout this book where I wondered if this was based on true events. The details and scene setting made me desperate to find narrative nonfiction of the same quality. So there you have it. I have 1 book left. I might start it today, I might leave off a little bit. I haven't decided. I read a lot this week. Hi, last night before I fell asleep I started The Taking, which is my last book in this project. I'm so excited. This one's about 410 pages, and I've read something by this author before. It was called Brainchild, and I know that because I read it as a teenager and I thought I was really, really clever when I wrote a review of it, starting with, "So this book is the brainchild of Dean Koontz." Yeah, don't be teenage me. She was dumb. She was actually pretty smart, but that was just not good. Anyway, I'm going into this not really knowing anything about it besides what it says on the front cover, which is "One rainy night, the end of the world began," and I didn't even know that until I just started the book. I read 2 chapters. It's good writing so far. I'm enjoying the writing so far. I'm confused as to what's going to happen because basically it starts and our main character is a writer and she is still awake one night because she can't fall asleep very easily even though her husband falls asleep within minutes. So she decides to get up and go write, and when she gets up she realizes that like it's raining outside, which she already knew because she could hear it, but also there seems to be light coming into the room weirdly, which doesn't make any sense because there's no lights outside, there's no light in the room, but she has a better time seeing than she usually does. And she goes down to turn on her desktop computer, this is 2004 by the way, or this was published in 2004, and looks outside and the rain is kind of luminescent, which is weird, and also there's all these coyotes on her porch just kind of standing there and chilling out. And then she ends the chapter by touching the rain and then eventually going to like wash her hands because she's got rain on them and something weird happens, which I won't spoil for you. And then she has the realization that the rain smells like semen. And I'm like, what? What? So this is just starting out with space jizz ending the world, apparently, is how it's going. I'm gonna read more, but I just had to tell you. Hey, guess what? I did it. I finished it. This book was a lot. So basically, yeah, we know the world is ending. I think I told you that in my last clip. And there's a lot going on because not only is there something coming in from above, and we've got some reports from like the space station that things can just like get into the shuttle when they shouldn't be able to, but there's reports from around the world before all of the communications shut down, and then there's creepy things like, oh, I don't know, fungus that looks like it can probably harm you, as well as creepy bugs, as well as the protagonist's father, who should be institutionalized, just showing up. She hasn't really seen him since he murdered a bunch of kids when she was in 3rd grade, so you know, that's not great. Oh, and I forgot about the creepy doll. There's basically everything that could be creepy and weird in this was creepy and weird in this. Also, the majority of this took place over about 12 hours, and the last couple of chapters kind of went a little bit more forward than that, which was kind of cool. Pardon me for the interruption. Apparently there is a rocket launch happening today, so Chad needed to tell me about it. So I'm probably gonna go watch that, but when this video goes live, oh good, the postman can see me talking. Hi. So unless there's terrible technical issues, when this video goes live, it will be my 40th birthday, so please let me know down below, happy birthday if you feel so inclined, but also what book should I read before I turn 50? Let me know. It's very weird to think that I will be in my 5th decade when this goes live, but here we are. That's it for this 4-year video. If you feel like liking it, that would be really nice. Share it with your friends if you think this was super ambitious but also entertaining. Subscribe for mostly videos that don't take this long to film, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye!